6:30 p.m. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'm going to read aloud the vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Oh, you're good. I think that was me. All right, and I'll open it for oral communications from the public. All right, seeing none. A couple chairperson's remarks tonight. The first one to the committee, Paul Lees is unfortunately ill and sends his regrets. He couldn't be here tonight. A reminder that Brian's evaluation, we had originally set a due date of Friday, but we're going to move that out till Monday. So if you can make sure, I know, if you can make sure that you have those completed and submitted. It was. If you can make sure that you have completed those and submitted them by Monday, that would be great. And I'm going to punt to Deb here for a quick comment on our traditional school committee activity over the summer.
Yes, our traditional get-together over the summer. So I will be sending out probably 3 different dates for everybody to decide which one is the best one for you. This would be for the get-together that we've been having at our house, where the whole school committee and central office administration gets together, and it's a time to not talk about school at all. Have fun. Yeah, it's a good social time. So I will be sending that out, and please respond as soon as you can about the dates, so that then we can move forward and establish a date. And then once that happens, I will send out the document that decides the potluck thing, yes. So you can say what it is that you're going to bring, okay?
All right. We're going to take tonight's agenda a little bit out of order because our student of the month is not here yet. So we're going to do retiree recognition first. So thank you to all of you who are retirees or family and friends of retirees who have come out tonight. I have cards and flowers for all of you. So it's good. I got it. Charlene Walsh, the cafeteria manager.
Narissa.
Yeah. Thank you. Charlene Walsh, who is the cafeteria manager at Newbury Elementary School for 23 years. She's not here. Okay. She's supposed to be. Teresa Arsenault, who was the Salisbury Elementary School nurse for 5 years. Congratulations and thank you for your service. There you go. Oh,
And
here you go. Absolutely.
And so for those who were at the retirement party, they received their gift from the district, which is also an engraved pen. So you weren't able to be there, so this is also a thanks for all of the work you've done. So thank you, Terry.
Barbara Oswald, the occupational therapist from Salisbury Elementary School for 17 years. Go. And there you go. Thank you.
Got your pen, right, Barbara? Had your pen. Oh, no, we're waiting for yours. That's right.
It's coming. It's
She was a
coming.
late decider.
Sharon Hoagland, who is the custodian at the high school for 24 years.
Goodness.
Thank you. There you go. Oh.
Same thing.
It's good. And last but not least, I saw the very tear-filled ceremony last Friday where Principal Daw bid a fond farewell to Kim Wright. So last but not least, Kim Wright from the central office. High school office. We will miss you. But I'll see you at graduation next year. Oh, hang on. There we go. Oh, I do. I have one more. You're right. Sorry. And Tony Castro, physics teacher at the high school for 12 years. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your service.
And just to confirm, so Tony has already enjoyed a year of retirement. He just retired into last summer, so he has already confirmed that retirement is a good thing. Yes?
I was going to say, can we ask you how it is? Is it really relaxing? All right. Thank you all for coming tonight. We very much appreciate your service.
Can I just say one last thing? So we have on the agenda printed tonight, it has all the retirees. So again, just for those who aren't here tonight, Charlene Walsh, NES Cafeteria, Norma Koloski, instructional assistant from Pine Grove, Lisa Alder, office clerk from Salisbury Elementary. From the middle school, we have Carol Olje, an instructional assistant, Jan Tosi, a social studies teacher, Marianne Guerin, English teacher, and then also at the high school, but not here, is Janet O'Leary. So collectively, the retirees this year represent 232 years of service to the district. So as we say thank you, we are genuinely saying thank you for your service.
And I will say, we are going to be here a while tonight. We totally understand if you don't stay. Thank you. Thank you for coming and enjoy retirement. Yeah, I'm going to bump to subcommittee assignments.
Yeah.
All right. Give them a few more minutes to exit.
So for clarification, so when we determine the student of the month prior to moving this meeting to 6:30, so Cheryl Caracciolo, who's the cooperating teacher who nominated him, I had 7 o'clock on the agenda and she was expecting 7. So about an hour ago I said, oh yes, I forgot to tell you it's 6:30. So she was racing, she's here, making sure that we can get Aiden here as soon as possible.
All right. With that, I'm going to, again, take part of the agenda out of order and bump to the subcommittees, since that's a relatively short discussion, I think. So first of all, my apologies to those of you whose preferences I could not take into account. This was an extremely difficult year to assign subcommittees. So traditionally, we've always had one member from each town on each committee. And I've always tried to take, or previous chairs have always tried to take members' preferences. You were asked to put in first preference, second preference, third preference into account when we were doing that. This year was an extraordinarily difficult year because it is a TRTA negotiation year, and 3 of our members, so basically a third of the committee, would have a potential ethics conflict with that, with negotiating that contract. So 3 of us literally could not serve on that committee. And then traditionally, PNN has met during the day, Finance has met during the day, and PNA has met during the night due to shifting work schedules and did I flip them? I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. Due to changing work schedules and who could serve on what committee, we're going to have to, PNN is going to have to move later. There's just no option to keep it at the time that it's at right now and be able to sit that committee. So I am putting forward to you tonight a suggestion or a recommendation that we sit the finance committees the subcommittees as follows, rather. For the Finance Committee, Jeb Choate, Tina Tsortzis, and myself. For Policy and Advocacy, Erin Berger, Paul Goldner, and Linda Litkovsky. And for Personnel and Negotiations, Maureen Heffernan, Paul Lees, and Dina Sullivan. Can I get a motion to set the subcommittees as recommended?
Make a motion. I'll second.
All right, and I will open it to discussion, and I very much understand if there's discussion on this because I couldn't consult all of you, obviously, and there are some boomerangs, shall we say, whammies that got thrown into the midst of this. All right, excellent. So seeing none, all in favor? All right, and we have unanimous approval. So I put this on this earlier agenda. We have our business meeting later in the month. I put this on this earlier agenda so that I know Finance will meet later this month. PNA will meet later this month. I'm not sure PNN, I don't think, has a set negotiation or set meeting date right now. But as you're going through these, if you can double check the meeting dates that are already set, and we'll make sure that they work for your new members, whoever the current chairs are. And then at your first subcommittee meeting, if you can reorganize and let me know if there are new chairs for those subcommittees, so that I know who to address with comments, concerns, or questions moving forward. I would appreciate that. All right. I still do not have a student of the month, so we are going to, do you want to move on?
Go to start with school improvement plans, yeah.
All right, school improvement plans it is. So I believe it's, yes, Newbury Elementary is up first. So welcoming Principal Yando. Yeah. We have.
Yeah, so you have a
received an
new
updated
copy.
version,
There was a
right?
couple edits, and there was an additional piece of data that Beth added. So the one that was on your table tonight is the correct version, not the one in your packet. It probably has a handwritten annex, is that right? Yeah, so the handwritten annex. So as we start school improvement plans, just to set this up, so you know that one of my goals was to rethink the school improvement planning process, the timelines. I don't think we've arrived at the perfect timing. I think rather than presenting them along in January with the budget, I think that didn't work well. We moved it to later in the spring, and it got pushed to June. I think all the principals would confirm that June is not a month to be finalizing school improvement plans, as we're just trying to survive till the last day of school. So just to confirm that, there's a couple. Jim's going to provide a little kind of reworking of some data that was included in his SIP, because we had a process in place. Kim was working with principals to streamline data. I had a conversation with Jim and messed everything up, and so told him something differently. So as we're going in 18 different directions this time of year, it's not the best time to make sure we get SIPs that are consistent in the approval process. So just to set that up, that I do plan to come to you with a plan that would be different for next year in regards to the timing. Exactly what is TBD. But I want to thank the principals for pulling through, because this is a hard time of year to be producing anything other than students back to their families for the summer. So with that, Beth.
You're not going to tell him it was my idea to do it in.
So if she wants to take credit,
I'll take credit for
Beth
it.
liked the June idea. It's her fault.
No, I liked May, then we got bumped to
Oh,
June.
you like that? Okay. She conceded June.
It's a good evening. I'd like to introduce Jenny King. She's my co-chair on the school council. And I'd also like you to recognize the other members: Bridget Mancia, Michael Waliski, Daryl Kwiatkowski, Leah Peacock, and Jody Anderholm. I'm going to start on page 6. So I just want to review the 3 goals that we have on our school improvement plan. Our first goal is our social emotional goal, to provide a learning environment that fosters resilient students who utilize strategies and skills for social and academic success. We have a mathematics goal. 90% of the students would demonstrate mathematical literacy and application of mathematical skills and concepts at grade level. In our science goal, students will engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate to develop investigation skills and an understanding of the nature of science. I'm going to go through our action steps and just kind of update you on the progress. We continue to review the curriculum maps. I would say they're utilized the most with our math implementation, our science implementation team, that when we go through a curriculum and we look at changes we want to make in the structures, we go on and utilize them at that point. I know the science implementation team at the beginning of the year really utilized the data and determined how we were going to teach the units and changes that we need to make in our instruction. And our focus in science was really to look at helping students answer scientific questions and open response questions. And we came up with that focus by analyzing our MCAS data. As far as analyzing data, I did something different this year. I wanted to differentiate the data meetings, because I find it's hard as an instructional leader having that one-on-one time with teachers. So I asked grade levels, would you like to have an individual meeting with me, or would you like to meet as a grade level? So grades 2, 3, 4, and 6 chose to meet with me individually, and K1 and 5 met as a grade level. And I think it went very well. I found it very powerful to sit with the teacher, have them come in with their data, and I was so proud of the work that they do with differentiation. They came in, they could tell me exactly how they were grouping the kids for interventions, flex time, and then we could really have some nice talk about their instruction in the classroom. They asked questions, do you have any ways I can maybe teach this better? One teacher shared that from her evaluation, there was a comment that I made about her math language, that she should use the correct math language. Don't just assume the students don't understand, use the correct language from the beginning. And she shared that she really thought that improved her data. And I wouldn't have known that if we didn't have these data meetings. So I found it very powerful. I know grade 6 said next year, because they share the students, that they want to meet as a grade level, but all the other ones seem to really enjoy that one-on-one time. And I learned a lot about the students, more so than I would have in a grade level data meeting. So that was really powerful, and we want to continue that next year. And then when we analyzed the data, the meetings wouldn't go as well without the support of our reading math specialists. We sit together before, and we look at all the data. We look at students that are getting intervention, students that maybe need enrichment, and we really make our plan from there. And then they run grade level meetings, and then I run the individual meetings. So it's a real team effort, and without their support, we wouldn't be where we are with literacy and mathematics. So I really want to acknowledge Dr. Laura Page, who is half-time. We hope to get her back full-time at NES at some point, and Margot Ryan, and Kelly Mahan, our reading interventionist. Without their work, we would not have the data that we do. As far as implemented multi-tier systems of support, that's really what we use to determine interventions in enrichment, or if a student really needs some type of core instruction. And we continue, even though I don't have a literacy goal on this plan, we continue to implement the district literacy plan, and you can see all the things that we implement that is on that plan that continues to help with our progress. I'm moving to page 8 now. Implemented differentiated instruction. You can see all the types of interventions we do for reading, writing, and math. And a lot of that comes out of our IST, instructional support team, that meets teachers, bring referrals of students. They might be having difficulty, say, in reading, and we sit there and we problem solve. We put together a plan. We progress monitor. We check in every 4 weeks to see if they're making progress. And I really think that the whole process is working so well. And I just can't say enough about my teachers when they come to the IST meetings, that the type of data that they bring. They're really thoughtful in what they think the students need, and they bring data to support that. So they really have done a nice job utilizing the data. So all these assessments that we do, which is a lot for teachers to do, they're utilizing the data, and it's really making a difference. If you look at our Inspire and STEM Scope, the 2 science programs that we're using at NES, as I said at the beginning of the year, our science implementation team, which is a vertical team, K-6, sat and we analyzed the MCAS data, and we thought that the open response questions were giving our students the most difficulty. Writing really was kind of a focus at NES this year, in math as well, with their problem-solving open response questions. We decided that we wanted to do some work around CER, claim, evidence, and reasoning. And 2 of my 6th grade teachers really utilized that with persuasive and informative writing in 6th grade. So they took the leadership role, and we had a PD day where they explained to the teachers how they were using it within their literacy and within their science. We gave every classroom a poster. Teachers started incorporating that into some of their daily writing, and it really has made a difference in the students' work. Moving on to page 9, our social emotional and PBIS curriculum and supports. We have a lot in place there. If I can draw your attention down to the social thinking curriculum and the zones of regulation, We have 75 students that are seen on a weekly basis. Some are in social emotional support groups, some are in social lunch groups, some are seen individually by the guidance counselor, and then the speech and language pathologists go in classrooms and model the social thinking curriculum. And we have some teachers that teach that themselves now from having the speech and language pathologists introducing that. Zones of regulation is something that we're using across the school. So those are the real two curriculums that seem to be really making a difference. When you look at the office behavior referrals, you can see back in 16-17 we had 89 students, 17-18 63, and this year 55. In the first 2 years, that was data that I had in January. So when you see my graphs that on the next few pages, the data that we have for this year is at the end of this year. So there is a lot of progress there. And part of that is the PBIS, positive behavior supports that we have in place for students. The behavioral expectations are very consistent throughout the building. And as you know, we have the green and blue tickets at NES. And the students respond well to that. And just having all the posters in the building so they know what's expected is making a big difference. I'm going to move now to the graphs on page 11.
Can we actually stop for a second and see
Yes.
if there are questions? I just don't want to
Oh.
make it all the way to the end
Oh,
and then be
that's
going
fine.
back to page whatever. So, to the committee, questions? Not pause here? You want to pause after the data? Oh, pause here and do student of the month? Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Is this a logical breaking point?
Sure.
Just because we have our student of the month.
Oh, that's fine. No, that's fine.
The schedule got messed up because of me, so rather than making them wait here all night, if that's okay with you, Missy.
That's fine, Brian. That's fine.
All right. I'll introduce.
Doing the introduction?
So yes, I will. So Cheryl Caracciolo, teacher from Triton Regional High School, to introduce.
Literally a mic drop.
Is that good?
Who's going to hold the mic?
I'm going to hold the mic.
To introduce our June student of the month.
Hi. Any of you that don't know me, my name is Cheryl Caracciolo. I'm a special education teacher in the high school. Let me start out by saying that Aiden is a very special young man. I've never been personally witness to any student that works as hard as he does. His mother relates that he spends a minimum of 4 hours per night on homework, much of it in preparation for the following day's lessons. He consistently receives excellent grades. He is on the student council. He participates in band, men's choir, school plays, the drama program. He's the member of the ASSIST program, where he meets with other schools in the North Shore communities to brainstorm how they can better their communities, not just academically, but in all areas. Aiden challenged himself his freshman year by taking honors English. Although it was a bit of a struggle at first, he persevered, met with his teacher after school, worked hard, and kept an open, positive attitude. Aiden realized that getting extra help was a positive thing, and how it was in his best interest to advocate for himself and ask for help. He not only listened to what Ms. Muller had to say, but he applied the skills and is a much better English student because of it. He was able to obtain honor roll status all 3 quarters so far of his freshman year, earning all A's and 1 B on all 3 report cards. He's kind and helpful to others and always willing to offer his assistance academically to anyone who asks them. His teacher remarked on his drive to achieve, as well as his excellent attitude, while he always displays a positive, warm, and humble, non-judgmental demeanor. The end of the school year will be a bittersweet one for me because, as some of you might or might not know, I'm a special education liaison in the high school. Aiden was assigned to me to be on my caseload. He has been my student all year. I've witnessed his drive to succeed, and I am now thrilled to report that because of his hard work and perseverance, Aiden will be the first student that I've ever had in my career that has successfully worked his way to become independently strong enough to no longer require special education services. It's difficult to choose one trait that stands above the rest for Aiden, but I can only say that whatever he sets his mind on doing, he not only does it, but he does it well. Congratulations, Student of the Month, Aiden Bahasic.
That's fine. That's way more important than this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's worth pausing for.
It is.
So that's our fourth time, right? The fourth student.
That is our fourth student of the
This
month.
is so a third of a year, but I'm glad this is a tradition. We'll definitely keep going.
Yes. I know.
We need to put tissues out.
Yeah.
And I will say we have 4 pages when you print it.
Yes.
I think. 4 printed pages of nominations, and there are a phenomenal range of students on there who are being recognized for all sorts of different things. It's interesting to me because Brian and I sit in on all of the decision making, but it rotates with policy and advocacy, who from there sits in on the decision making. Just how many different things and where kind of the where the heartstring pulling, I guess, as it is, comes from, because everybody, identifies with different types of students, and it's just a wonderful thing to see and have those conversations to sit there. And a lot of times it's 3, 4, 5 students that we're down to, and it's a tremendously difficult decision to make between those students, even once we get down to that level. So.
We haven't figured out exactly how yet, but we're trying to figure out how to acknowledge the people who were the students who were nominated as well, and then restart the clock again for next year. So that's a work in progress.
All right.
All right.
Apologize, Beth. Thank you.
Sorry to cut you
It's
off.
fine. That's
Thank
fine.
you.
I needed to get water anyway, so don't worry.
Demonstrating your flexibility.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so I'm going to continue on page 11.
Well done.
Already had it, so.
You can see from the social emotional visits to the nurse's office that they have declined. As you look through these graphs, you're going to think, what was happening at NES in 2015, 2016? Things have gotten much better. And again, the green bar represents this year, and it shows that it's declined. This is the end of the year, whereas the prior years were in January. Students receiving social, emotional, and wellness checks. We have certain students that check in the office, check in with me or Mr. Jewett or the nurse, the guidance counselor. We currently only have 3 students that we have to do that with, so that's a nice improvement. If you go to the next page, the number of bus incidents reported. I do have to say, 1 came through today, so that green bar should be 9. It's the end of the year. That's declining. And last year, the 11 was in January, so this is really good news. And part of that is at the beginning of the year when we do bus evacuation, we go on and we do the PBIS training on how you ride a bus. And I think that's made the difference. The bus drivers have green tickets they give the kids, so they've bought onto the PBIS, and that's, I think, made a big difference. The number of students brought to IST for social, emotional, and academic concerns. You'll see there are 13 this year, and that's a good thing that the bar is going up, because that is, teachers are really looking at students. They're not waiting until it's a crisis and the child really needs some help. When they start to have concerns, they're bringing them to the IST, and we put interventions in place. So the IST process is working very well for those students who need extra social, emotional support. I'm just going to quickly go through the literacy data for our DIBELs for kindergarten. You can see that 69% of the students are at core, 29% strategic, and 2% intensive. At the beginning of the year, we had 19 students in intensive, and we're only down to 2%, so there was some nice growth there. We found a lot of our kindergarten students who came in this year really didn't even know their letters. So the kindergarten teachers and the reading specialists and interventionists really spent a lot of time with them, so we're proud of that data there. Grade 1, at the end of the year, we had 82% of the students at core, 10 at strategic, 8% at intensive, and second grade, 73 were at core, 10 at strategic, and 17 intensive. Our real celebrations, I would say, are grades 3, 4, and 5. We used to have a literacy goal that 90% of the students would be would meet benchmark at a grade level. In grade 3, in our iReady results, we have 90% of our students, and we have no students in intensive and 10 in strategic. So we're very proud of the work there. And this all really is due to the work that starts in kindergarten. We really try to front load and get those kids the types of interventions that they need early on, so when they get to 3rd grade, we can reach our 90% goal. Grade 4, our iReady data at the end of the year, 91% were at core, 9 were at strategic, and we have no students in intensive. Grade 5, 74 at core, 20 strategic, and 7% at intensive. The grade 5 teachers say that the material that they're reading in this assessment is very rigorous, which is good. But we also talk a lot about grades 5 and 6, and this came up in our data meetings, that the stamina students have, we're trying to give them more experience so they can read the long passages and do better at that. And in grade 6, 69% of the students were at core, 22 at strategic, and 8 intensive. And it's also really important to look at the intensive at the beginning of the year. We had 21 students who were at intensive when we're down to 8. So there is some nice growth in grades 5 and 6 as well. And the next page shows our math data. If you go to the end of the year, you can see the growth that the students have made. At the end of the year in 1st grade, we had 70% of the students at core. Grade 2, 79 at core. Grade 3, 85. Grade 4 met our score improvement goal of 90%. They were at 94 at core. Grade 5 was at 90. Grade 6 was at 92%. And the overall for the school, we had 86% of the students at core. So we're very pleased with that math data. And a lot of the math progress we've made really is due to our math implementation team. This is our 4th year having the team, and it's a vertical team, K to 6. We get together, we talk about what's working. Are there components of math in focus that we're not really utilizing? We did find that there were, and so we talk about how we're going to implement those. And one of the things, our geometry scores improve because of the math implementation team really looking at not having all the components of geometry taught, so we moved the lessons up earlier, and we also implemented the calendar math, which we focused on just geometry part of that, and it made a difference. Okay, now I'm going to just move you to page 20 and just talk about a few of the highlights of our priority actions. So if you look at our social emotional, again, we have PBIS really is working well. One thing that I really want to highlight is the work the teachers did this year. Last year and this year, we read a book on executive functioning, and that each grade level developed 3 strategies that we would teach the kids, and we're putting together a manual. And so it'll be coming out in the fall. And we also have visuals, what the strategy would look like if it was appropriate. We also want to share this with parents. We'll be presenting to a PTA meeting so parents can come and learn more about it. But our hope is to help those kids with the organizational issues really be successful. If they're taught specific strategies each year, so when they're in kindergarten, if they're taught 2 strategies, when they go to 1st grade, the teacher will know and they can remind the students of those strategies. But we also want the strategies, if they can support them at home, we think it's going to help the children. We're finding more and more children have executive functioning problems, organization, and it really impacts them in the classroom. So we want to offer some supports to them. I think this is going to be great. One of the ideas in 5th grade is to kind of have like a resource kit for the 5th graders, because in 5th grade they have 3 content teachers, and it's hard for them to organize the material, so they're going to develop some type of a resource kit that they can have, and then they're going to have something in the classroom, so all the materials that they need, whether if it's for science, they're housed in each homeroom. So just small things like that I think are going to make a difference for our students. And moving on to the math, I'm moving along here, page 22. In math, as I said, I mentioned the calendar math. I really think we're getting better with our interventions, and part of that comes from the data meetings and our IST and enrichment. We're offering more enrichment for our students in math as well. And as I said, the math implementation team, we really have true teacher leaders at NES, especially in the math. The math implementation team ran one whole professional development day, and they did an unbelievable job. And I really think teachers learn best from their colleagues. And then our science goal, we have our science implementation team, which has been very successful, and we've done a lot of work around CER with that. One of the other things in the math goal I want to talk about is our makerspace room that was fully implemented this year. I was up there for about a total of 6 hours a week. We had it open for 3 days. It was at recess time, so students could come up at their lunch recess. It was most utilized by our first and second graders. I would have anywhere from 25 to 30 kids come up on a daily basis. Throughout those days, we'd have 100 kids come in. Some of it was designed really to teach them the design process. A lot of STEAM activities were happening. I had an artist from Newburyport come in and do a painting with the students, trying to bring more community resources in. Is that my timer, Kim? Oh.
Softball team won, if anybody
okay.
wants to. Triton, the girls
won.
top, yeah, they won 12 to 6.
And the students had challenges. So next year, I want to recruit even more parent volunteers. It's midday, so it was kind of hard, but I did have a core group of volunteers, so I could kind of leave it for a little. It was actually the highlight of my school year being up there. I kind of want to become the STEM teacher, the makerspace room teacher, and I kind of get to do both, be the principal in that, so it's fun. So that's something we're going to continue next year. And of course, the last page shows the seniors, not this year's seniors, coming through, and the teachers doing their professional development. So it's a real learning environment at NES. The teachers are learning and the students are benefiting, and we want all the students to come back to NES their senior year so we can see all the great work that they've done throughout their 12 years, 13 years. Yeah. Any questions?
Bringing it up to questions from the committee. Go ahead, Dina.
Thank you both for being here tonight. I'd like to go back to page 9. Kind of touched on this a little bit, Beth, but during the budget process, I heard you very loudly and clearly that you felt that a social worker was needed, and unfortunately, it was not able to be put into the budget. I just want you to kind of look at this again and just tell us, I mean, I know you said that, and I'm glad you mentioned later in the SIP where you had mentioned on page 12 about the number of students brought to IST for social, emotional, and academic concerns, because that one really screamed to me. But the fact that you said that you're viewing that as a positive because interventions can be placed earlier, do you foresee that these numbers that you're showing on page 9 will decrease as well because, or actually maybe the number of students being helped will increase because teachers are more aware of it and looking for signs of stress or needs of support?
Yeah, we're saying, you know, if you know a child's having some difficulties, bring them to IST so we can kind of get it documented. We could look at what we can put in place for them. Could we use more help in this area? Absolutely. And I really think a social worker would be a good resource to the families. I mean, we have a guidance counselor. She's straight out through the day. She's doing excellent work. And you know, Mr. Jewett does a lot of work around this as well. He's out on the playground and in the lunchroom every day helping those students. Those are times where students can have some real difficulties. And I find that my speech and language pathologist is starting to go out because she does so much teaching with the social thinking curriculum. She goes out and observes students. I also had her do a training with instructional assistants who are on the playground with kids who might have trouble, social emotional issues. She taught them how to support students on the playground, and that's made a big difference as well. But could we use more help? Absolutely. And I really think having a social worker would be a real resource to the families. And Mr. Jewett and I, he has his students that he checks in with. I have my students, the ones it just kind of breaks 50-50. Liza Marcolini has a classroom where a lot of the behavioral students will go, or students who just need an additional place, and that's really made a big difference. But could we use a social worker? Absolutely. But
I hear
we
you,
make
and
do with what we have.
Right, exactly. I hear you, and like I said, I really wish that could have happened, because I personally think that, if we don't take care of things at the elementary school level, we're just kicking it down the road to the middle school, to the high school, whether it be in academics or in social, emotional, mental issues, whatever. So, anyway, but I appreciate you. I like that interventions are being placed as early as possible.
And I do think a lot of the behavior kids come to the makerspace room. A lot of them are real engineers, and rather going out on the playground trying to find something that they like, they come up there. They're 3 days of the week, and what the kids are creating up there is unbelievable. I had to clean the room out the other day. There were all sorts of things. Leprechaun traps, you name it, it was up there. So,
Other questions? All right, I do have a couple. So can you talk about, I see a lot of interventions that are listed for the students that have clearly been seen as needing them. Can you talk about there's a huge portion in the kind of green portion of the graphs. What are they doing during those times, and how do you determine what's appropriate for them to help them grow in addition to the students that need additional supports to kind of get up to the grade level?
well, when we analyze our data, it's broken into different parts, so we can really look at that to find what they might need. For math, we have Math Olympiad, we have Online Math League. There are a lot of resources that we can use in the classroom for enrichment. Trying to think of something specific that might happen in a classroom. I know one student who's very strong in math. He kind of had like his own math binder with real challenging work that he liked. One of the other things that I didn't highlight that we implemented this year was our UPS check: understand, plan, solve, and then check your work. We had an initiative where kids would bring their problem solving, their UPS check problems to me. They would get an orange ticket. We had 2 Kindles donated, and they would put their name on the orange ticket, and we drew 2 tickets. We had 2 students from their problem-solving work receive the Kindles. So that was very motivating. The students love the problem solving. I would say the 5th grade got really competitive with the problem solving. They liked it, but I had students 1st and 2nd grade bringing me problem solving. So we try to think a little outside the box and give them different opportunities. Dr. Page does a lot as far as enrichment with the students.
On
And I would also say the Makerspace room is providing a lot of enrichment for students.
on the charts that start on page 20, there's a lot of kind of notes in there about, looking for a decrease in office referrals as evidence, or looking for an increase in something, or more participation. Can you kind of give a ballpark of what numbers would be meaningful for those? I guess I just don't have a sense of if it's 10% of students, or 10% decrease. Is that?
Well, I guess we're just that's where we have the graphs, just because we're looking at a certain number. We just want to see. I don't know if I can give you exactly a percentage. I think the graphs kind of show that what we're doing is
Yeah, I'm just
working.
thinking about moving forward, given that this is for 2019, 2020.
Yep.
Are you just looking to continue with the trend that's already there, or do you have kind of specific numbers in mind? How do you know that you've met that, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
I guess we don't really have specific numbers. As I said, we're just really looking to see the numbers, decreasing over time.
Okay.
I think that tells us that what we have in place is working. If you look at the graphs, there has been a big change since that year. I don't know. I think PBIS is really responsible for a lot of this. We had students who would go from the classroom to music class and be in crisis, but now we do so much training around that, and it's a whole school initiative. Mr. Susi, the custodian, has given out green tickets. The lunch monitors, recess monitors are giving out green tickets. The bus drivers are giving out green tickets. We're really focusing on that positive behavior. And it's really hard in an educational setting to focus on positive behavior all the time. it was a hard shift for people, but I really think we're there. And when someone is focusing on negative behavior, they kind of stand out now, including myself. A couple times when I've yelled down the hallway, kids running. Instead of saying, "Oh, you're doing such a nice job walking," you stop your running. So it stands out when someone doesn't use the PBIS. So I really think the PBIS is responsible for a lot of that.
And my last question is on the iReady and Easy CBM data, which I know we see kind of aggregated all the time. I kind of, when I was going through, I was thinking about those individual students. Do we see students that are going from, do you see students that are going from green to yellow or yellow to red in addition to kind of moving, obviously the general flow is in the direction toward green.
We have a couple that would dip back. And a lot of the students who are like in intensive are like 1 point away from being strategic, so you really need to analyze it. You can't, when you look at the graph, you're seeing the percentage, but when we sit down and we analyze those students, and a lot of times the data meetings are like 1 point away from being strategic or 1 point away from being core. So it's a lot of analyzing the data and just looking at, like, when we come to, when teachers bring kids to IST, we'll look at this data, we'll look at classroom samples. There's so much that goes into planning interventions. And the teachers are really good about changing their intervention groups too when a child's doing better.
I know we always look at kind of or sometimes spring and fall, sometimes spring, winter, and fall. Do the teachers usually identify those students in between assessments where there are difficulties, so there's an increased difficulty for the student? Or is it primarily picked up during the assessment process?
Well, I would say in the older grades, a lot of the kids we've already identified, and that's why in kindergarten, you want to give children time in kindergarten to adjust. But around January, the kindergarten teachers, they're seasoned enough that we start to have concerns about some kids. So it comes at all different times. Sometimes there's situational things going on in a children's life that they're bringing them forward. It might be social emotional, but all the children who have social emotional difficulties in school tend to have academics. So we really look at the whole child. So it comes at different times. Sometimes at the end of the year, you might get a few more because, teachers are kind of just seeing if they're going to pick up. Some kids don't really start to make progress to April or May. It takes them a while to get going, and you want to be respectful of that. But so it's all at different times.
Any other questions from the committee? Erin?
Can you talk a little bit about the flex time that you have? Is that 40 hours a week, 40 hours?
No, it's
a day?
40 minutes a day that students have, yeah. And they might go to different classrooms. They could work with the reading specialist, could work with the math specialist, could be working with an instructional assistant. They might go to a different classroom for something. It's pretty much interventions and enrichment, what the students need.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Thank you, Ms. Yando. This was
Thank
a
you.
very thorough presentation.
Thank you, Beth.
That brings up Pine Grove.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'd like to talk a little bit about my school council members. We had a big shift in membership this year. Mola Vassar continues to be our community rep, and she's also my co-chair. Jonathan Dono is a new parent who joined us back in the fall. Nicole Serino joined us this past spring. Elena Rosnov is also a parent and has been on the council for several years. Liz Butler, grade 1 teacher. Jen Dubus, art teacher. And Elise Earls joined us last year as a kindergarten teacher. And she now went back to 5th grade for this year. So I'm just going to review our philosophy at Pine Grove. We believe that PGS is a place where all members, students, parents, teachers, staff, and administrators work as a team to educate and ensure that each child can reach their full potential. We believe in the promise of every child and educating the whole child. Our school climate instills a lifelong love of learning. We believe in excellence, integrity, teamwork, and attitude. I'm going to take you through the review of progress for the 2018-19 school year, which begins on page 7 of the SIP. One of the big things that I'm excited to talk about, and I mentioned this last winter, a year ago when I presented, was that we started a new PLC called the Instructional Rounds process. And what the Instructional Rounds is a group of educators that go in classrooms after we have identified a problem of practice, and we had 2 instructional rounds this past year. The first one was back in March 26th, and then we had a round on May 22nd. What happened was, for the past year and a half, my math coach, reading coach, and assistant principal, we trained our teachers on what the instructional rounds, similar to the rounds that doctors do in hospitals. And over the course of this past fall, we identified through several activities, based on 2 books that we're using for our research, we came up with this as a problem of practice. Based on teacher feedback, administrative observations, and assessment outcomes, how are varying levels of student engagement impacting teaching and learnings? So as I said, we had a network of teachers. The network is the group of teachers that actually goes into the classroom, and then the host teacher is obviously the teacher that welcomes them in, and the network of teachers is actually focusing on that identified problem of practice. So what they do is they go in with a clipboard, and they focus on what the students are doing and saying and what the teacher is doing and saying, but it's more about the level of student engagement. After the rounds, and we had a total of 24 teachers participate altogether this year, after the rounds process, there was a debriefing situation that took place where we followed a specific protocol. The protocol was led by the reading and math specialist. I actually did not participate in the actual physical instructional rounds. My goal is to get the teachers to be very comfortable doing this without the administrators kind of hovering. So the only portion that I participated in both of those rounds was the debrief, and I sat with my assistant principal in the back of the room and we just listened. We did not really participate. And at the end of the debrief, each teacher was asked to, as a takeaway, sort of an exit ticket, they had to identify what they had learned during that rounds process, and then how was that going to change their practice. And they had to put that in writing to me, and that was collected over a series of a couple of days. So the goal moving forward next fall and into next spring is to make sure that every single teacher will have participated in the instructional rounds process, and that's the focus of our PLCs. We continue to hold our data meetings. We benchmark 3 times a year in math and ELA. We use the BAS, the DRA, the Easy CBM, and iReady. So in fall and winter, we hold 2.5-hour grade level data meetings per grade. We review the benchmark results. We identify struggling students and determine the skill set that must be addressed first. Tailored interventions are then created, and we establish intervention groups as well as win groups for high ability students. So Narissa, to your question to Beth, the kids that are always in the green, we have a lot of teachers that instead of doing a struggling group, they want to take on those high ability kids and do a win group for those kids. So for example, we would have a teacher in the past would do 5 days a week of a low performing group with a specific strategy or intervention. They've cut that down to 3 days a week, but they'll take those other high ability students 2 days a week so that those kids are also getting and able to participate in the WIN group. And obviously we look for whether students are closing the gap. So this is all part of the MTSS. So WIN meets 30 minutes a day. Again, the focus is on ELA and math. There are organized interventions run for approximately 10 weeks in the fall and 10 weeks in the winter into the spring. Students, again, not in groups, still do either math or ELA and are assigned a WIN ticket. Lots of times teachers will post on the smartboard what those students will be doing for that 30-minute block. Progress monitoring is done either weekly or bi-weekly, depending on what is being used. We progress monitor with DIBBLES, Read Naturally, leveled literacy intervention running records, foundations, the double dose groups, and students can test out prior to the end of that 10-week session if they're making significant progress. And if we have other kids that were not in an intervention group within that 10-week session, we can pull them in maybe 5 weeks into it if their teacher is beginning to see red flags. So we're trying to make sure we cover everybody. During these meetings, the data is projected and discussed. Again, the questions are, is the student making progress, and is that progress being able to be carried over into Tier 1 instruction? The interventionists are classroom teachers, special education teachers, instructional assistants, the reading and math coaches. We continue to employ Keys to Literacy. Ongoing coaching is provided. We have 4 Keys coaches in our building. We continue to do 10-minute grade level snippets at staff meetings where teachers will share out what they are doing for Keys to Literacy, and occasionally a Keys coach will offer some new coaching during the staff meeting. And also the assistant principal and I look for the Keys to Literacy strategies to be implemented during our walkthroughs. Regarding differentiated instruction, again, the PLC meetings and faculty meetings promote the review of best practices to support the learning levels of all students, including the MTSS supports and best practices for helping us to continue to build a community of learners. Technology. We continue to focus on the Google features, emailing, the documents, slides, calendar, drive. Twitter and Facebook continue to be utilized as a means of communication, with several hundred new members joining our Facebook and Twitter page this past year. We've really upped the amount of communication that we are communicating out to the public and to the parents on Facebook and Twitter. And also with technology, benchmark testing in math and ELA is computer-based, which continues to help us prepare students getting used to taking MCAS version 2.0 on the computer or the Chromebook. Regarding professional development, we continue to focus on the new science curriculum. We have 2 building ambassadors, one at the primary level and one at the upper grade level, that reach out to teachers and are sort of the support and resource people for teachers that have questions regarding the science program. And these particular ambassadors also meet with Anna Bates and central office people to continue those ongoing conversations around the new science curriculum. We also focus on social and emotional learning. We had part of that, we were able to have Dr. Angela Mousseau come and do a 2 half days of our PD. The first one was in May, and first one was in April, the second one was in May, and she spent a total of 6 hours with our entire faculty around speaking with us on anxiety and how to help children with anxiety, and she was fabulous, and thank you, Kim, for that. Keys coaches continue to offer trainings either before school, after school, or during teachers' prep periods. And again, as I had mentioned, technology trainings are offered here and there. We sometimes have teachers, especially with the new technology, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. We have a lot of new technology coming into the building with the project, and this is really like high-tech 21st century technology that a lot of it's above my head, but the company that has been installing it, Pro AV, has come out 3 times already this year and provided after-school training for our new teachers going into those classrooms, and will come out again in the fall. Parent and community involvement. The PTA has been absolutely amazing this year. We've had several assemblies that took place throughout the year, including participation in Crayola Color Cycle Program. We had a BMX guy come out and talk to us about character building, which was totally aligned with our monthly character education themes, and he was a big hit. We had a laser show. A gentleman came out and did a laser show, which was a very science-based assembly and activity. Kindness was a big theme that the PTA promoted, which trickled down to us using that in our building too. Acts of kindness, which resulted in an all-school ice cream day. And we had a fabulous readathon that ended in the spring with an all-school donut and hot chocolate and PJ day. And I got to be sprayed by silly string by 18 students who had the most reading points. That was fun. School facilities, we're in the home stretch. What can I tell you? We are in the home stretch. We have one more phase to go through that semi-started a couple of weeks ago, and that is the entire East Wing. Our phys ed teacher, Mr. O'Neill, has given up his gym again for the last 2 weeks of school, and thankfully the weather, with the exception of tomorrow and the other day, has been cooperating. And our library teacher, Julie Stafford, has moved across the hall into an empty first grade classroom because we had several moves take place 2 weeks ago. And I just want to point out with this building project, Emma Hunt, who is on the building committee, she teaches second grade. She has been amazing and so supportive and has helped coordinate schedules. There's a lot that goes into moving when you're doing a building project, and her particular grade level has moved 3 times just this 1 year, along with several other people that have also moved. But I just wanted to give her a big shout out because she's been a huge help, and she doesn't know that I was bringing her up today. So anyway, we hope to have everything done. If I remember correctly, WT Rich told me that they would be turning the building back over to us on Friday, August 23rd, and teachers will be able to get back into their buildings. And I highly recommend for school committee members who have not seen the renovation, please come this fall. We will do another tour. Oh, I know what I wanted to tell you. I gave a tour to 12 former Pine Grove teachers. They're retirees about 3 weeks ago on a Thursday afternoon. They could not believe the building, and it was really fun to hear them say, oh, you used to teach there, and the room was this color, and you used to teach here. And it was really amazing to take these former Pine Grove teachers through the building to see how different and how exciting it's going to be for future teachers and future students. Our Committee for a Positive School Culture continues to meet. We are not meeting as often as we used to because we are now in year 5, I believe, so we met 4 times this year. Obviously, we focus on positive intervention supports. The meetings were topic by topic, whatever was happening in the building. At the beginning of the year, the teachers do their routine trainings around all of the, as Beth mentioned, we have the posters hanging in our building too. Social and emotional curriculum, we're using Merrill's Strong Kids, and I mentioned this, the PTA purchased this for us a year ago. So teachers this year, especially in the primary grades, really got into doing, there's 10 lessons for the year, and I know like first grade really took off with it, and it's trickling into the upper grades. I also wanted to mention that our new assistant principal, Nicola Perrier, has worked very closely with me and Mr. Campbell, our guidance counselor, and we have created, as part of our Committee for a Positive School Culture, PBIS, several behavior plans for students that were experiencing really challenging behaviors in classrooms. And it's something simple as a checklist where, if an example, if a student gets 4 smiley faces throughout 4 different sections of the day, they come to the office and we have a prize basket. And we have kids that have completely, it sounds like we're bribing them, but they really work hard to get, and it's just little trinkets of things. Or it could be time with Tracker, which I was going to mention. Our new therapy dog has been a big hit. He's been working with us since January, and Nicola Perrier happens to be his owner handler. He's a licensed therapy dog, and he's made a huge difference in working with kids that have significant anxiety and some behavior challenges. He's not a social worker. I still would like a social worker at Pine Grove School, but Tracker has really, it's been amazing. And I know, Narissa, you've been there when Tracker is there, and you've been able to see what he's been able to do, and he is the cutest thing. Regarding our science curriculum, obviously we're with Inspire K2 and STEM Scopes 3 through 6. We focused some of our PD on science this year. Again, I mentioned we have the science ambassadors. Teachers are spending more time teaching science with targeted standards, and it's very STEAM oriented. And I think this new science program is going to dovetail very beautifully when our STEAM room is finally done at the end of August, and I can't wait to see that. That's just going to be an amazing space for teachers to sign up and go in and teach science in that particular space. And I want to just circle back to the data grids that start on page 13. So we have the Dibbles data. K through 2 made some gains in some areas, and some kids took a little back step. We're working on that. We held data meetings the other day, so for these kids that kind of went a little backwards, we have already put into place for them that they will start in an intervention group immediately when school starts in September. So we're not going to wait until October when we have our 2.5-hour data meeting. So we're looking at helping these kids close the gap a little bit sooner than waiting till October. In iReady, we had more students go to core and less in strategic and intensive. And then as well on Easy CBM, which is the math portion, Grade 3 did have a little bit of a setback, and I'm anticipating you wanting to know why. I think this particular cohort in Grade 3, we have 13 students on IEPs, and many of them struggle in the area of math. And as the second half of the year approached, the Math and Focus Grade 3 curriculum gets more challenging for these students. So again, these issues were discussed at our recent grade level meetings on what we're going to do to help bump these kids up once they get into 4th grade. But the rest of the data looks pretty good with a lot of kids in the green. Dina?
Sorry, Chris. I'm also a little bit concerned about grade 4 because the core portion seemed to remain flat, and there seemed to be a slight decrease in intensive. I mean, what happened with the 4th grade too? That there didn't seem to be a whole lot of progress there as well.
I'm just thinking in my head about that cohort of students. I'm trying to remember the conversations the other day from the grade level meetings, but again, that is a cohort. I believe that is the cohort. We have there's 24 students in each class, approaching 25. So the other classes are smaller. I don't know, if class size has a lot to do with that, but each class has 24 students. That's a high number, in my opinion. So that definitely.
I was going to say too, just on that fourth grade iReady, in the fall for reading, they came in at 24% core. And in the spring, they were at 67%. So as the curriculum became increasingly more challenging for some of the kids, it looked like they were able to meet those demands. And for other kids, they obviously had some struggles with that too. So. And I think, I was going to say, like, last week was pretty much, we finished testing last week.
Right.
So for some of us, like we have not had a chance to sit down and kind of unpack. I know the schools have had that time, but I think with kind of a shortened school year, we have not had the time that we need to unpack some of this.
Just the fourth grade iReady too. It's a third of students basically that are in strategic and intensive. It's a huge percentage compared to, what we've seen previously, either in other grades here or from the Newbury Elementary data. Excuse me.
That was the struggling one last year too.
Yes, that's correct, that cohort.
Yeah, Linda, sorry.
I just have a question about you say that some of the kids test out, and I know as you do more and more assessments, some kids just go through the motion and probably don't do as well as they should. But as kids test out of each one of these, the red, the yellow, into the green, is there any, giving them like a trinket or something to show them, to maybe show other kids that maybe if you sit down and really try hard on those assessments, that you can get something too, like to give them some incentive to do well on those tests that.
Tracker time, that sometimes works.
So I'm just thinking that if they test out and you make a little bit of a
Big deal.
about it.
And actually, one of our sixth grade teachers made huge gains in, I think it was iReady, from September to the mid-year benchmark. Massive gains, and I think Kim, you and I talked to you about this. So Nicole and I asked this teacher, what did you do? How did you make such big growth? And he said, I sat down with the class and I gave them a pep talk and I told them, you need to do your best. You need to try your best. This is important data, and sort of like talked it up, and the kids listened to him. So we talked about that at our mid-year data meetings about teachers needing to give pep talks and say, don't just put anything, because we do have some students that will just because they just either are uncomfortable at taking the test or there's a whole bunch of variables.
And I think too, can I just, because this is important to me for that the kids understand the data so they can set individual goals for themselves, so it becomes intrinsic and they can see the results of their hard work, of their time spending more time reading and then starting to enjoy it more, so that I know, and I'm not going to talk about Salisbury, but they had a big, but I am gonna, because, but they had a big celebration for kids who, and I think the beauty of that is that some of them didn't meet grade level expectations, but they hit their target that was set for them, for their growth target. So as we become more comfortable with the iReady, there are a lot of different conversations that the teachers can have with the students, certificates where they actually set targets for themselves, and to kind of to tie those targets into the joy of reading and understanding and growing as a learner, I think is crucial in getting the kids to become involved in this data process.
I mean, when we went to our conference down the Cape, that was one of the things that they spoke about, is having the child talk to you about if they're not doing well, what do you think, what do you need to help you to do better, what kind of graphic organizers, and have them explain to you. And I think that's huge.
It's so important.
The only thing that I'm concerned when I look at these plans is the sixth grade. I see that their iReadies, I mean, I know from one school to another, it might be 8%, 10%, 5%, but cumulative, going into the high school, you're going to have, 25, 30% of the sixth grades going into the middle school. And when I look at the middle school, there's 19% going to the high school that that are in intensive. So that's the main thing that I have concerns of them going up to middle school. Are they going to do well at the middle school? Our job as us, as well as all the educators, is to make sure that these children are reading close at or above grade level. And as they get higher in the grades, I feel that some of these kids are going to fall off or possibly drop out because they're not reading at levels.
Yeah, and I know at the middle school level, we're going to look at the curriculum, how much time is spent reading texts, and is there a endurance piece, because that, the assignments become a little bit longer and they definitely need to do more close reading and the demands increase. So for some of those kids, it's a stamina that they need to put forth, and then how do you develop that over time? What types of books are we giving them enough exposure to different types of books that they can read with the support that they need? And we also, for next year, again, I'll talk for the middle school too, Al. But it's this project-based learning class that really is all about giving students the opportunity to apply literacy skills in a very engaging, authentic way, where they get to kind of choose their own problem to solve. And so, again, very authentic, very engaging, highly motivating, purposeful reading, and those types of interactions with text that our goal is that you see that. We call it grow the green, and give them a purpose. Just like with the data, they have to own it, they have to understand it, they have to be motivated. Yeah. You're welcome.
Now on to the goals, and that starts on page 20 of the SIP. So the overarching goal continues to be to ignite passionate, lifelong learners who are prepared for the challenges and opportunities in the 21st century world. Again, the focus is on the academic, physical, and social and emotional development needs of individual students. We want them to fulfill their full potential and to become productive, contributing citizens who are prepared for adult life. Objective number 1 is to promote a school environment that supports students' social and emotional well-being. We want to build a strong and healthy school culture. We want to promote wellness, safety, and security. We want to teach students self-awareness and interpersonal skills to make responsible decisions. Action items to go along with that objective is to continue our Committee for a Positive School Culture and to also further infuse the social and emotional competencies of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, building relationships, and responsible decision-making. We have a very involved school council and a parent community. We continue to implement horizontally and vertically aligned school-wide protocols. We continue with self-assessments. We're tracking data, and we're focusing on classroom interventions in this area. Objective 2, to ensure that Pine Grove School students make developmentally appropriate gains as readers and writers. We want to continue building a strong foundation of reading and writing skill sets that will ensure students are prepared for success as they progress through the upper grades, including college and career. Action items to go along with that goal are continue the balanced literacy focus of our reading instruction, along with lots of coaching. We have our reading coach has gone into several classrooms this year and has modeled lessons, modeled guided reading groups for our new teachers, so we want to continue that. Continue to strengthen the use of keys to literacy through the coaching and the walkthroughs, as well as the embedded professional development that we do at our staff meetings. We are empowering teachers to employ best practices and research-based best tiers of instruction. And several teachers this year are piloting empowering writers, which will be fully implemented across the district, I believe, next year. Objective number 3 is to ensure that Pine Grove School students make developmentally appropriate gains in mathematics, building a strong foundation of mathematical skill sets that will ensure all students are prepared for success as they progress through the upper grades, including college and career. Action items to go along with Objective 3, highly qualified district and school-based PD with math in focus, and our math specialist coach happens to be going into different classes and spending significant amounts of time with teachers who sometimes need a little more help in teaching the math curriculum. and she's been modeling lessons and planning and consulting with several teachers. We want to ensure that teachers are implementing math and focus with fidelity, and that fidelity part also comes with the coaching piece. We're empowering teachers to employ best practices and research-based tiers of instruction. And we are now also have been encouraging peer observations. We're encouraging different classroom teachers to come out of their comfort zone and go into another grade level teacher's classroom and watch how that teacher is teaching math. And then we've provided time for these teachers to come together. I've gotten them coverage so that they can come together and have sort of a consult meeting and talk about what they saw and how the teacher who observed can do better in her or his practice. Objective number 4 is to ensure that Pine Grove students make developmentally appropriate gains in science and technology engineering. Action items to go along with that. We have increased the time on learning for science and technology engineering, and we're also looking into making that happen in the upper grades next year as well. Teachers are asking for more time to teach, so we're looking at adjusting schedules. We're working in conjunction with the district STE curriculum committee to implement the district and state recommendations. And as I mentioned before, we continue to employ 2 building-based science ambassadors that have been reaching out to teachers. I mentioned this before or last year, our art teacher is STEAM certified, so she's able to help out with that as well. And our 5th objective is to create technology-rich digital classrooms where students use appropriate and safe technology tools and resources to support the learning and teaching process. We were lucky enough to have the PTA purchased Chromebook carts for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade this year, which has been really helpful. So now there are Chromebook carts at every grade level. Technology-rich classrooms that support instruction and student learning will help provide every child with those 21st century skills needed to be successful in a society that demands proficient understanding of those tools. Action items are that administrators and teachers are using a variety of technology as part of their routine practice, same with the students. Teachers and administrators have participated in a variety of training modules, as I mentioned earlier, with Pro AV solutions coming out. Every classroom is equipped with an interactive projector and whiteboard, which does amazing things. And then our small group instructional learning spaces, some of them have the interactive projector whiteboard and an interactive digital TV display. I think we have 18 of those throughout the building. So there's a lot of technology, and we're just going to continue to offer those trainings for teachers because we want that technology to be used. However, technology should never replace good teaching. Any questions?
Is that a yes?
First off, Chris, I want to tell you that I like the way your goals were written. I like the fact that you say developmentally appropriate or, something to that effect, because I think it kind of goes back to Kim's point of every child's going to progress at their own speed and at their own pace. And I like that, to me, that acknowledges their progress in your goals. My one concern is with school council. You said that, parents can reach out to school council members and staff as well, but on the website, there's no way that I could find for parents to know how to reach out to school council members. No email, of course they'd know the school personnel email, but any parent that's serving on that committee, I couldn't find any way how a parent could contact them. And that's just something that I think is important as we look at redesigning our website.
Absolutely.
And adding
Thank you.
information.
Other comments, questions? I guess I'm just going to say I think the same thing that I made to the same point I made to Principal Yando, which is I don't quite grasp how we know that these are successful. I'd love to see some sort of a measurement where it's not just, to me, it's saying, yes, we're going to put these supports in place for teachers in a lot of cases, or a requirement in place for teachers, but how do we know that's being really successful? That's what I'd like to know when we get done, when we look at this next year. How do we know what do you look at to say, yes, this was successful, or no, it wasn't? And let's look at either the process or, the original goal, whatever it happened to be, and say, yes, this was done well, or no, this didn't get the results that we needed, and we either need to change our tactics or kind of look at the process and see if something was missed along the way as far as getting this to the point that we wanted to get this to.
Narissa, are you referring to each of the goals in the SIP?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes all the way through. I don't know how you know that you've met your goal.
A great question.
Any other comments or questions? Nope. Go ahead.
I guess I would only say is that that's exactly counter to what Dina just said, which is they're written in a way we can get stuck in the data,
Yep.
and it won't acknowledge the fact that there may be a year where 10% of the students are going to move from 6th grade to 7th grade and not be, or be in intensive still. So it's hard. We can write concrete goals. The whole we get stuck on SMART goals, and there's a value in it being smart and measurable. But when we rely on that entirely, that gets away from the point that Dina made that allows for the fact that students are still going to progress at different paces. And how do we make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable for progress, but also acknowledging that, I don't know how to say it differently, kids are going to progress at different paces.
I was just going to say, too, they have, and we can look at this, and you'll see it in Jim's, but they have growth percentile, they have now, to speak just to that point, is they actually have growth percentiles, right? So you can maybe miss the mark as maybe you're 2 grade levels behind, right? So they're going to give you a target that's appropriate for you, and then if you hit that target, you hit a certain growth percentile. So they set that target for you, and that's a new report that Dibbles has now just come out with. I already had that report. So maybe what we can do is think about recrafting the goals to say 100% of because really there's nobody that we don't want to grow, right? 100% of our kids are going to show 1 year's growth, if not more. And that's the other thing that I like about it, because if every kid always makes 1 year growth, we're never going to close that gap. So they actually have stretch goals too. And they talk about how you need to intensify interventions in reading and writing opportunities. So I think maybe that's the conversation that we shift from setting like a bar goal so that we can really measure what you're talking about, and it really kind of it answers both of those questions so that we can measure growth, because that's really what we want. And actually, that's kind of the direction the state is moving in as well, because accountability is just not hitting a target. It's about, have you hit the targets for a particular group of cohorts? And I think that's important to keep in our focus.
And can I just say, Narissa, I understand when you asked Chris that question, which was the same thing you asked Beth, the first time you asked it, I wasn't quite sure what you were getting at. I understand your concern, but I think in these SIPs, we kind of deal with the hard data in these graphs and also with the softer side of it. But I do think, Kim, I like that idea of actually maybe giving us a little bit more information, because sometimes these graphs are a little bit misleading or don't quite give us the information that we want. I mean, I'm not an educator, but, it's nice to hear, like Chris had said, the 4th grade. If we're looking at a larger class size, that certainly, in my view, can impact the quality of instruction or the ability of children to really stay focused and learn what is being taught. So I think we certainly could have more information, but.
Yeah, and that's the point too. It's at what point does the actual school improvement plan become a data meeting, right? And so then that's that balance too, because there's so much to celebrate beyond graphs and bars. And I think we mentioned that even 3 years ago when we talk about, it's really about educating the whole child. And so it's really kind of for us to continuously put ourselves in check, because you can report out on growth percentile, stretch growth, benchmarks. So it's like, what matters to most to us, and how do we not lose sight of all the other great things, like with PBIS and maker spaces and those great things.
Yeah, and I was going to say another piece to this is, when we sit down with teachers in the fall to write their education goals, their student learning goal, and their professional practice goal, their goals have to be aligned to our school improvement plans, which have to be aligned to the district strategy plan. That's what it's called now, right? District strategy plan.
He's going to make a new name because no one gets it.
So when we go in and we do these formal observations throughout the year, obviously we can't report them in our school improvement plan, but that's all part of how we know whether or not a teacher has met their goal, because they have to provide evidence to us at the end of their 2-year summative goal. And if they didn't meet, in some cases that happens, why? And then we begin those conversations. So I just think that has to be a contributing.
I think there's a lot of different factors, and I apologize because I wasn't even thinking about the data that was in here already. I was actually thinking more about growth data, and if we're going to say 100% of students using Chromebooks and the Google technologies, is it 82% right now, and you're aiming for 94% next year in certain grades? I'd like to see, how do we know that there's progress? I mean, it's easy to say, yes, there's a goal, but if your goal is to get your students to not increase abilities, but to just show that they are progressing, how are you measuring that? And how there's got to be a way. It doesn't necessarily have to be these hard numbers with red, greens, and yellows. It could easily be something else.
Yeah, and I think it's important to not lose the sight of the fact that we need to measure, right? I mean, data is important. We need to keep data in our purview. But I actually, there's a quote that ended up in my inbox today on completely unrelated discussion. A British statesman, Benjamin Disraeli. There are 3 kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. So, I mean, we can get really quickly stuck in analyzing the statistics and the data about what we look at. So I think that so what you said, Kim, I'm glad you said that, because it addresses both of the questions. We need to look at the data, but we need to make sure that we're presenting data in a way that's helpful. Because Chris is living this day in and day out with data teams, and the information that the teachers are working with is helpful to drive instruction, but we need to present it in a way. So that's something we can take away and kind of tweak how we present. That's
Add it to the retreat agenda.
You also have to realize.
So we're having a 17-week retreat now.
With the exception of one person here, we're not educators.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you do ask very thought-provoking questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, sorry, Linda. Go ahead.
I think the growth data would be good too, because of something that Mrs. Yondo said, where, there's students that are in the intensive that they're 1 point away from getting to strategic and 1 point from getting to core. That I think if parents were to look at this and see those numbers, I think seeing the growth percentile, just to give another data point for parents and for us to understand and show the great work that our educators are doing,
Paul?
To that point, those graphs don't, goal number 2, I'm just looking, ensure that Pine Grove students make developmentally appropriate gains as readers and writers. These graphs can't show us that because they're not about gains. They're showing us where the kids are now, and that's a different sort of important data because it's letting us know whether they're ready for the next level or not, or what sorts of supports they need. But if we're talking about making the gains, then have you met the goal? The growth sorts of data are more appropriate for that, but what needs to be in here in order to...
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Montanari, you are up.
I think you have it all, no matter what.
Can I ask a general question?
Yeah,
General
go ahead,
question?
Deb.
I guess it might be good to be reminded of what the goal of these are. What is the goal of the school improvement plan? Because everything that people are asking about has a place.
Yep.
There's a time and a place that we should know all that, but what is the goal? This might be rhetorical. I'm not asking, sorry. What is the goal of the school improvement plans? What are we?
I think that's a good question and worth taking 30 seconds to reiterate for folks who might be listening. The school improvement plan is the product of the work of the school council, which is comprised of the principal, teachers, parents, and community representatives, and it sets the goals for the school. as determined by those constituents. So it's the voice of teachers, it's the voice of parents and the community, and the principal saying, looking at what we have as a district strategy, what we have as district goals and vision, within that, saying, here's how we interpret those for our school. So far, we've heard Newbury, Pine Grove, and now we're going to hear Salisbury, of how that team has determined to best meet those goals within each of the schools. So it's important also to note that these are 3-year plans. So these are 2018 to 2021 plans. So the format is providing an update on progress over the last year and setting any adjusted goals for the coming year. I don't think none of the goals have changed. The goals have remained the same, and there's been some tweak to the actions. But that's the purpose. So I think that's a good thing to clarify.
So can I just, on that note, I just want to make sure that I'm in the right direction here, because we are talking about school improvement plans moving forward for the coming year, but we should be also checking in every year during those 3 years, right, on kind of the progress that's being made.
So
Okay.
these were written for 2018-19. They're now being adjusted, really, so this is a mid-year or a mid-cycle for the second of 3 years, and then there'll be one more year next year for the 2021 school year, and then we'd be writing new 3-year plans.
Okay. That was my understanding,
Yep.
just making sure.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. All right, Mr. M, you ready?
All right. How this goes. Jim Montanari, Salisbury Elementary School principal. Thank you for having me today, talking about the SIP, also known as all this data that you may or may not want to see. So I want to thank Deb Dennehy, Jane Keeler as the teachers that represent Salisbury Elementary School, Shannon Lucia, the co-chair, and Ann Farrell, who has resigned and has been replaced by Michelle Pimentel, and Tiffany Nigro from the Pettingill House. I did change it a little bit, just because I thought there was a lot of things of repetition, and I wanted it to flow through the on how I present. So when you talk to Brian and Kim, what worked well, I'll continue. What needs to be tweaked, I'll do that. So we have 3, we'll start on page 6. Our focus areas, we have English. Let me just back up. I always tell the parents at the open house every September that I really want to start with the child to be happy, to feel and be safe, and to have self-confidence. That's where we want to have them. And then once we have them, then we can educate them to the best of our ability. And by the time that they're leaving Salisbury, our goal is that they are able to read well, think mathematically, and have empathy, not just for others, but for themselves. And the empathy, I don't know how to measure that. But I know how to measure the read well and think mathematically. So our focus areas for English language arts is students learning how to read and comprehend well. So we collect data on comprehending at grade level measured by the iReady, and we also focus in on the annual typical growth on the iReady, and we do focus in on the dibbles for decoding, and we focus in on the growth for decoding. For math, we want students developing number sense and the ability to problem solve. Again, 80% of students will be computing accurately as measured by the easy CBM, CCS math. We'll just call it math dibbles from now on. And attendance, students attending school on a regular basis while feeling safe and being confident, which ties into our belief at the very beginning of their stages at Salisbury Elementary School. And we're looking at 5% of the students will be classified as being chronically absent. Chronically absent is missing 10% of the school, no matter what the excuse. It could be a major illness, could be death in the family, could be a really tough year for a family, or it could be school's not a priority, or it could be vacation, or it could be all three, who knows. And then 80% of students will attend school on a regular basis. To be quite honest, that doesn't have as much impact on education as negative as the impact of chronically absenteeism. But when we're showing data, I have a data wall for attendance, so students, I'm not going to show the students who are chronically absent, I show on the regular basis who are attending. So we have Dibbles Next, we have Dibbles Math, we have iReady Comprehension, we use Aspen. And the supporting data, I put down Momenta. Momenta is the organization that we're lucky enough to bring into Salisbury Elementary School by the couple, Mr. and Mrs. Burns from Gloucester. They, for the lack of a better word, adopted us they want to put money into a school that have the same vision and to help students who need it. And we met the criteria, and they liked us, we liked them, and it's a beginning of a good partnership. So we have, through Momenta, we have the data collection, which has a great deal of information, but basically you have grouping squares, you sort by gains, and you progress monitor. And then you have an intervention plan. And then you have a communication between the interventionists and the classroom teacher. And then through all of that, you also have the coaching, the walkthroughs, the debrief, the modeling, the follow-through, and the accountability. And all together, you get certain results. Some very good, some areas that we need to work on and do better. We don't make excuses. We figure out why, and we look at ourselves and we reflect. We have 80%, according to the Dibbles, recommended goals, not the former goals, the recommended goals. We have 80% of students coming into kindergarten and intensive. That's 16 out of 20. That's an enormous amount. This is where we're starting. It's not where we're starting, it's where we're ending. We have to think of it as a marathon, not a sprint. And we have to be patient with that. And we're going to have a lot of success, and we're going to have some areas that we need to grow in. So on page 7, again, we have the priority action, with who's responsible, the implementation stage, evidence, and outcome. You will see throughout on this page, you have coaching by the reading specialists, and you have fidelity. I try to keep it as simple as possible for myself because things get kind of busy, but also for everyone else. We have, if we want to integrate science and social studies within the ELA, other than getting a resource, we have coaching by the reading specialists. We have the fidelity of the foundations and the Wilson. We need coaching by the reading specialists. And we also have implementing keys to literacy. We have coaching by the reading specialists. Darlene White has been an astounding educator and has really helped move Salisbury Elementary forward. We have the mastery objectives, which was something that we've implemented here in Triton about maybe 5 years ago. We're going to bring it up a notch. We're going to bring it in, it's going to be called a focus wall. And a focus wall is if you have it behind you, you could have the mastery objective or the big question. You could have a thematic connection. You could have a comprehension focus. You could have the vocabulary. You could have writing. You have everything you're going to be teaching and planning, and it's going to be right behind you while you're at the teacher table. It's something that we learned through Momenta and we learned through, I think, when we went to see Beverly. It really brings the mastery objective of what we're teaching and why to a new level. So we've started working on that. On page 8, one area on 1G, we have educators will continue to implement the Momenta structure and philosophy. We have, again, if you look at it, coaching by Momenta, coaching by reading specialists, coaching and progress monitoring. One area that we've improved on was the data meetings. We've developed through Momenta, you have workstations and you have teacher table. We've gone away from the guided reading and guiding students from an L to an P based on DRA because books are labeled, students shouldn't be. So we focus in on the direct explicit instruction. And we have a purpose and a strategy that each group of students will be working on, whether it's daily or whether it's 2 to 3 times a week by the Tier 1 interventionist or the Tier 1 teacher, which is the classroom teacher. We also have implemented partner reading and reciprocal teaching. And next year we'll be implementing debate in grades 4, 5, and 6. So when you talked about with the higher students, we will be implementing reciprocal teaching at the 3rd week of September of next year, of the school year, with the high flyers of that class. And what we've said, an area that we have had concern is we don't have the data yet. You have enough, you have the students in front of you, but okay, I understand you don't have the data, so we're going to get all the data in the 4 squares and we're going to group everyone right now, and we're going to give that to the teacher, so you're going to have your groups already without the data while we take new data. So you're able to know who the high flyers are and actually get into the reciprocal teaching right away. Grades 4, 5, and 6 will actually be implementing probably by Thanksgiving debate, and that's going to be something exciting because that's going to bring it to another level of that will both focus in on the comprehension. Questions? If I talk too fast, I'm sorry. I know that we got like 17 minutes before the puck drops. Okay. So on the page 13, I just wrote down some glows and grows. You can look at, when we go over the data, you'll be able to see that. But areas that I liked is the implementation of the Momenta structure and philosophy. I thought the teachers did a remarkable job. According to the coaches for Momenta, who I have Miffy Summers, who's my coach. So when we say coaching is the key, that's for, Darlene has a coach, the teachers have a coach, I have a coach. It's all about getting better. And if you think of it as an Olympic athlete, they have coaches and they're the best athletes in the world. So it's not that we need, we're failing, it's that we just need improvement. And in order to improve, we have a coach. We focus on the direct explicit instruction provided at the teacher table, which is a kidney table. And the introduction and implementation of the reciprocal teaching in grades 2 through 6, which was outstanding, and I would love to have my grade 1 teachers to actually implement that in January of 2020. The grows, we need to do things quicker, and that's the 3rd week of September. We're going to have a focus wall. We'll have rotation charts, teacher table, partner reading, and reciprocal teaching for high flyers. And the debate in grades 4 through 6. I was a little ahead of myself on my notes. On goal, now we go to this packet. We'll go over and then we'll go to the graphs. So we talked a lot about the data and the SMART goals. I picked the 80% is, in education, 80% is mastery. I don't know who made it up, but that's what we focus in on. So that's where we have as the baseline. However, what I've learned through this past year through Momenta, and it's a real quick snapshot. So if you have on this page, the very first page on the iReady for the comprehension, coming in you have 33% core, 32% strategic, and 35% intensive. So to say 80% is really, it's not realistic. So what you do is you take the core and you add it to the strategic. And that's what you want for your core in the spring. So we would want, if we have 33 and 32, we want 65. And we got 63. So we were almost there. And arguably the most important is the intensive, because the intensive, to move students out of the intensives is the most challenging, and you want to cut that in half. And you want to bring half of them into strategic, and half of them, obviously, we want to focus in on growth, but there's going to be some certain individuals, if you believe in the whole RTI, but everyone can be moving forward, and that's how you close the gap. So overall, we had 35% down to 10. So that was excellent for that. We almost hit the core, and keep in mind, we do have people moving in and out, but in general, that's how we focus in on. Because sometimes the students who leave are core, and it just goes back and forth. So you really have to dig down a little deeper. But for in general purposes, this is perfect. And then again, we look at the iReady comprehension typical growth. You have typical growth and stretch growth. In DIBELS, they have zones of growth. It's all about growth. And for the iReady, you have grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, and you have the winter growth and the spring growth. And that's on the still on the first page. And again, You can see where individuals hit a year's growth in winter. That makes sense. So if you look at grade 2, 38% hit a year's growth in January. But by the time June or May, 74% hit the growth mark. Most were the same, some were different. Some did better, some did a little worse, and it varies on the student. We made sure one area that we took we tweaked a little bit is that if students were absent or if there was a student that needed a little bit smaller structure and a little motivation, I took them in the in the computer lab with Darlene, and the students do know where they stand, and we celebrate. We don't really look at grade level. We do look at color. Green is the best. Yellow is something you're on your way. Red we need to work on. It's okay. And then we look at the graph so you can see where they started, and then you hit the button, and then it shoots up. And we did celebrate that in the wintertime with parent certificates and Klondike bars. That was a big hit. And we did that again today during lunch. Not as big a celebration, but there are a group of individuals that I will be meeting with at the beginning of next year that didn't make the growth, and they were not core, and there's a reason why, and it's individual. And I think sometimes when you're in 5th and 6th grade, it's time to ask yourself why, and it's okay to ask that, and how can we do better, and what can I do to help you with that? So that's something that's going to be a little bit one-on-one. As you can see, great.
So can I ask?
Yeah.
Is this measuring growth beyond the grade level, or is this up to the grade level?
Beyond. It varies. So if a student is core at grade level, they might want to have typical growth, might be 4 points. They might be reading at an 8th grade level in 6th grade, and the growth is 4 points. Someone who's in 5th grade reading at a 2nd grade level, their growth would be 40 points. So the higher you go, the harder it is. So you'd have to look at that. So, and if someone's reading at 8th grade level in 5th grade and they didn't make growth, but they're core, I'm going to sleep well with thinking about him or her. So it's the individuals who didn't make that growth and are below grade level that I'm very concerned with. But if you're reading at an 8th grade level in 5th grade, that's outstanding. Does that answer your question? Okay. On page 2, basically you see the grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. I want to see the comprehension or overall placement as early as possible. So we added grade 2 this past year. Grade 1 looked at it, knew what the teachers were doing, students were doing. Grade 1 wanted in, so things were a little bit different regarding the dates because they did it in March and May. So they did not have as much growth because we were only measuring 2 or 3 months. But next year they'll be taking it in September. I don't have any problem focusing in on students' comprehension from grade 1 all the way through grade 6 in Salisbury Elementary School. So, and again, if you look at adding the core and strategic together to get the core at the end and dividing the intensive in half, I think it's clear that we've done much better in the intensive, and we're doing well with the overall core, but we're missing it on a few areas, and that we would have to look a little deeper and look at the individuals and to see if we're focusing in on apples versus apples or apples and oranges, depending on move-ins, move-outs, and a variety of reasons. That's when you kind of have to dig deeper into the data. All the way through grade 5, grade 6, and again, you're looking at, regarding the grade 6, you have 42% coming in intensive, now it's down to 21, so we've cut that in half. 38 coming in at core, plus the 21, that's what, 959, so pretty close to that. Grade 6 was a challenge because we had about 12, 15 move-ins and move-outs, so it's really changed the dynamic of that grade level, more so than normal. But grade 5, outstanding. Came in at 25%, leaving at 60. Came in at 35%, leaving at 12. The dibbles, if there's no questions, we'll go right into the dibbles. Again, we have the 60% to 68, not a very high area, but the way that I look at it is also we have words correct. That's how many words a minute. Yes, it's timed, but it's okay. If you're reading over 100 words, 150 words with a 98% accuracy, you're going to do well. We need to see how fast. And yes, we do take certain kids into a situation regarding if they stutter and so forth. But in general, we have about 60% coming in for words correct. Grade 1 doesn't do words correct until January, and that's the first time. So the data plummets because of that. But I still like to count it because that's where we start. That's our starting point. And again, so we didn't hit the core, but we were pretty close to the intensive. We are looking at why did we do better in the iReady for comprehension in general than the dibbles. Different reasons for different grade levels. Partially, I think, the MCAS season during the April and May, and getting into the interventionists and using special ed teachers for proctoring and kept making sure that students aren't missing their intervention as consistently as sometimes throughout MCAS. So it could be as easy as a scheduling adjustment on something like that. So that's something we're going to be looking at very closely. Dibble's next average growth, again, you're looking at almost 80% all the way through in every grade level. Kindergarten, you have the composite, which is basically everything from letter naming to phoneme segmentation, correct letter sounds. That's the beginning. Words correct is something that we're really focusing in on. One thing that's not in the SIP is the accuracy. We really have to focus in on the accuracy, and once the accuracy is at 98, 99, then that student can decode, and then that student can read, and now we're going to have to teach him or her how to comprehend. But overall, the kindergarten, from 32% all the way up to 76%, from 46% intensive all the way down to 11%. Keep in mind when you're talking about data, it is a moving target, and there's areas that you'll see that we did well, and areas that we need to, we're a little stronger from September to January, and then not as much through January through May in the words correct. We need to read more. In one area we looked at for grade 5. Grade 5 did outstanding in the comprehension, yet for words correct, 55% to 62%. Again, we fell short, but we also know that the novels that we only went through maybe a half a dozen, let's say, what would you say, about 5 or 6 novels, good novels, rigorous novels. We should do roughly one a month. That was our goal. Again, we're introducing them to more vocabulary, more books, more reading, more growth. It takes time. And again, I talked about this regarding what we're going to be bringing in from the focus wall, the debate, the teacher table momenta. So we're going to go back to the other in math. And again, we focus in on the 80%. Back on this page, this packet on page 14. Looking at math, Dibble's math benchmark assessment. Again, if you look through the action, you look through the evidence, you will see fidelity, you will see coaching by the math specialists, you will see progress monitoring. It's the same formula no matter what this topic is. We are going to work on bringing the UPS check template stronger. We have it in pockets, but it's a good method, and it's good to have the same type of language throughout the grade levels, even from grade 1 all the way up. Areas of growth are glows on page 16. I think the math and focus coaching was excellent. School-wide use of reflex math, again, very pleased. Bar modeling throughout. And the math implementation team. I thought we were stronger this year than last year. Areas that we need to continue to work on is, again, understanding and embracing the Math and Focus curriculum and teaching it with fidelity, and getting the UPS check procedure and language consistent throughout the grade levels. Going back to page 8, and again, you can see using the formula, adding the 2, for math, we should have hit 78, we hit 67, but from 22 down to 13. So again, we look at the intensive a little stronger. The area for the core, we need, overall, we start off slow, and you can see that from kindergarten, and even on page 9, you'll see that regarding first grade, second grade, and then all of a sudden in third grade, things went really well from 43% up to 71, 32% down to 16. And we kept moving in grade 4, 26% down to 20%. That would be an area that we would have to look at a closer. So there are a lot of times these type of graphs do not give you all the answers, but it gives you an area, okay, so why? So then you dig down, and then you ask why, and you figure it out. Grade 5 and grade 6 on the other page. Again, 63% all the way up to 82. See, 73, 79, they hit it, and then 21% down to 9. So that formula worked. For grade 6 went up, but not as much as we had hoped. However, 13% down to 2%, we'll take that any day of the week. And again, consistency with the bar modeling was something that we were very pleased with, as well as we reflex math. And the departmentalization in grades 5 and 6 was successful as well. That's math. Do we have any questions on that? Okay. So we have for attendance, we've been looking at attendance for years, and now the MCAS has looked to reward or punish because of it. So let's turn to page 18, and we have the importance of school attendance. So chronically absent for grades 1 through 6 is the basis. So I'm on this packet on page 18. So we started off in 2014, 2015, roughly about 15% of students are chronically absent. That's a huge number. How can students learn? How can students grow if they're not here? We dropped down to 12, almost 13%, and went up huge, almost 16% yet last year. I believe it's because we almost went to school into July 4th. So there were a lot of people who just, they left. According to Aspen on June 5th, and I went through every single kid, so it's really not as scientific as I'm sure MCAS is, but it's at 9.20. My guess is probably going to jump to 11%, give or take, which would be still a significant decrease in chronically absenteeism, and we'll be very pleased with that. On page 19, I do look at the attendance for a regular basis. We would like to have that up to 80%. Students, and I define regular single digits. If you miss 9 days or less, technically it's 5. If you look at all the research, it's 5 days. However, we'll go single. We'll go single digits. More importantly is the chronically absent. And again, individuals who bring in notes, that goes with attendance regarding truant. That's more of a legality. We don't want to go there. Chronically absent is basically purely 100% academic, and basically forming habits, life habits of coming to work or going to school and so forth. So it's a huge correlation. So I do like to say that in the 6th grade, we have 6% of students that were chronically absent, 7th and 5th grade also. An area of concern is the class of 2030. Not only were they 13% of that grade 1 were chronically absent, only 56% of them were here on a regular basis. So I'm concerned for the class of 2030. And what we need to do, we're going to monitor that, and we reach out, and it's every student, every parent, one parent at a time. And it's consistent, direct, respectful communication with parents and the importance of daily attendance. And if you're sick, I understand you're sick, but we share guidelines of why, what is, like, I don't feel well. I don't feel well because it's 80 degrees and it's Friday and it's a half day. And it's a half day and it doesn't really matter. That's something we need to talk about. One thing in Aspen that I didn't put in here, we were able to put down for notes. So if a student is absent and the parent is absent, no reason, medical, it's Friday, I don't want to come, whatever the reason, we document it. And then we share that with them at the end of the year, and we share that with them at the beginning of next year, saying we need your son or daughter here.
Where are you getting the
We
data?
collect it.
How?
Lisa Alder, the nurse's clerk. If every student who gets called in leaves a message, and any student who doesn't, we call and we get someone right away. If we can't get someone, we will do a wellness check within 1 hour.
Do you ask for the reason why they're out?
Sometimes. It varies. Some people want to, some people don't. And if there's no reason given, we respect that. Most of the time, people share.
Deb?
I have questions. I have more than one question, but they're all the same topic. And it involves the percentage moving in and out. And you just ballpark, if you don't have the specifics, what percentage of the school entirely goes in and out each year? I remember at one point I thought it was up to 40% turned over each year. Just, kind of.
About 15 to 20%.
15 to 20%.
I would say 15%.
Okay. Is there more turnover in one grade than another? Like, is it?
Varies.
It does vary. Okay.
1 year was, 2 years ago was kindergarten. That was tough. This year was 6th grade.
All right. And you mentioned last year as the attendance being off because we had school until 4th of July. Is the fact that lots of these children may be living in beach rentals or motels and they have to get out by a certain date and maybe they left because they had to get out by a certain date?
Some.
Yeah.
Not all. The majority on some, a lot of times it was individuals who had plans for vacation, and people just left. I've never seen anything like it, but I don't think any of us did. So that was a crazy year last year. So
I was going to say, if we looked at the data for all the schools, I
Yeah.
think there was a common trend
Yeah.
there for everyone after
so
about June 20th.
we're really around 12 or 13% in general, but our goal is always to get it to single digits.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Dina?
Jim, Momenta seems to be a big piece of all of this, and I'm not quite sure that I understand it. Can you refer me to a website or something that I can...
BSRI, Bay State Readers Initiative, or you can go momenta.org.
Thank you. And lastly, I want to thank you for the historical data on how Salisbury got its name. I've read these for years, and I never knew that. Learn something new every day.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Linda?
When they look at the attendance for last year for all the schools where we went to school so late, does that affect how we get dinged from the state?
From an accountability standpoint, it would, yeah. Yep.
For going to school so
They waive nothing.
It might work to our benefit, though, because the baseline is going to be really low.
True. Last year was the baseline.
Was our baseline year, so that actually,
We have 11 full weeks of summer this
Yeah.
year, so our statistics should look better.
yeah.
Everyone's still here, right?
A few more days.
Any other questions or comments? I just have one harkening back to actually a previous SIP from you. And this year, over and over again, I keep hearing that that notion of if a student has an adult that they trust in the school system,
yes.
how their outcomes improve. And I know that was something that you measured in the past. Do you feel like I think you had gotten it up into when you were polling the students, it was like up into the 80s or something like
it's
that.
in the 90s, consistently. Once we hit in the 90s, and we still take that data, I just didn't include this.
Yeah, no, I was
Yeah.
just curious if it was still that high.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do Mars Mentors. I think that what we found that the individuals that we actually gave most attention to, they said no.
Oh.
Even though we were right there with them individually taking it. And it's like, huh, what about me? Oh, yeah. I never really thought about it that way. Yes, I think that one thing that the Salisbury staff, very unique that way, is that they have, it's not easy. And I talked to the chief of police, we did the Alice and how the training and how the teachers responded and how they led that. And I heard that from how Alice, and then I heard it from Momenta, and how after our first year, we're more of a year 2 to year 3 school instead of just a year 1, and how they embraced it and really shifted their teaching and their openness and willingness to do what is best for students. And really, you can say that we try to meet the students at where we need to. But to actually do it on a consistent basis every single day, all year long, that's sometimes a little bit different. But for this staff, it's remarkable how resilient they are, and that feeds into the resiliency that the students, hopefully, when they move from 6th grade on up, are. And it's nice to see the seniors coming back. We had about 33, and I kind of look at who went to Whittier, where's this one, and the percentage of dropouts and so forth. And I haven't collected all that data, but it's nice to see. And who decided, I'd rather have an afternoon to myself. That was fitting, and it was a good group. So thanks for noticing.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Montanari.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, Mr. McCray, to the hot seat.
Jim's a tough act to follow, but I'll try. So I think I'd like to start by just basically kind of going back as to why the goals I have are why they exist. We have a goal in mathematics, we have a goal about technology, we have a goal on working with students with anxiety and depression, and we have a goal on the schedule. So at the time of development, our math scores in the MCAS were not where we'd like them to be, especially the growth, so we developed a goal around that. Also at the time, if you'll remember, we were talking about ceiling-mounted projectors in all the classrooms, and for whatever reason, there was just a mass failing of those, and we were scurrying around because they become such a crucial part of the educators and teaching. I was getting panicky about how we're going to start replacing them. That, and also the fact that our Chromebook amounts weren't enough to even be able to do a grade of MCAS at one time. I had to borrow from the high school. So we felt it was important to put a goal in place for that. The anxiety and depression, as we all know, in students has been increasing for a few years now. So that's something that's probably always going to be prevalent in school improvement plans. I would like to get to a point where it's never not in school improvement plans, but it's something that we have to deal with on a daily basis and continue to. And then, of course, we've talked about the schedule, and at the time we're developing and putting it in place and getting ready to put it in place, which we've done. So that's why these goals were developed. I'm happy to say that we've made some good growth on getting towards meeting these goals. Starting with goal 1, and I'm on page 6. The math goal. As you can see, I put down some of the growth data from 2017 to the test in 2018. In math, it's come up. Some of the reasons for that I've listed. We're in the 4th year of implementation. We've had Math in Focus coach come the last couple of, not coach, but coach is a good word, yeah, who's really great, and she's actually developed really good relationships with my teachers. This year, she took two occasions to work a half a day with each teacher. That's 4 teachers, 2 7th, 2 8th. Unfortunately, Mr. Conway, one of my 8th grade teachers, has resigned because his family, and he has to move down to Connecticut. So some of the growth we've seen, I hope doesn't go with him. He was a short-time teacher here, but he was also did an entire year of student teaching, and he been here from the whole implementation of Math in Focus, so he really had a good handle on it and did a good job. We have hired a replacement, I think, who's a very strong teacher. So we're going to continue with those Math in Focus visits. We have, I think, two visits planned for next year as well. And the teachers really get a lot out of, we started with kind of, let's have her meet with all the teachers together, and it seems to be a much better outcome when she meets with them one-to-one. She'll do some modeling in the classroom, and then she'll watch the teacher teach and give back feedback, and they have like a half a day to do that, so it's really worked out well. I've referenced some technology. I didn't always see math teachers using Chromebooks, and they really are starting to use Chromebooks and use some technology, game type things, competitive type things where kids really get engaged in for some formative assessment, and some of them even generate progress monitoring. Again, Mr. Conway was a big he pushed that a lot, and he got Mr. Gonzalez involved with it, the other 8th grade teacher, and they combined a lot to, they come down and watch each other in each other's classes. So that was really positive. We did a lot of work at the beginning of the year just looking at MCAS data and identifying, what we needed to work on. I think that's gone a long way, and hopefully it will go a long way in helping our scores over this last round. We put aside time and devices so that the all the math teachers could do what we call a boot camp, and they just really did MCAS test questions over a period of time, and we made it a priority for them to be able to use those devices, and that was pretty successful. We continue to have all the content areas have common planning time throughout the year. And they use that, especially my math department's real good at getting together and talking about things. It just kind of comes to them. And then we also had some students that used iReady Math. We haven't used that a lot. I look to try to expand on that because it's a good kind of engaging thing for students, especially students who are struggling. They can kind of go at their own pace and get some real positive feedback out of using that. As far as the technology goes, because of this new social studies curriculum, we were able to add 2 new carts. Our goal for Chromebooks is, I think there's a district goal to get, 1 Chromebook for every 2 classrooms. If you look at regular ed classrooms, we have 8. We have 18 regular ed classrooms. We're close to that. I think we'd need probably 12 to 14 to really get, 1 for every 2 classrooms. You bring in special ed and unified arts and stuff like that. But we're getting there, and we don't have to borrow anymore. Actually, the high school borrowed from us for a little bit this year. So we can do each grade on our own. And the social studies teachers, obviously, because of the new curriculum, are going to continue with ongoing professional development to bring those devices into their classrooms and use the curriculum. We have put in place a whole new way of, you have to get a Chromebook cart like a library book in the building now because it became almost like the Wild West and people were fighting over carts, which is a good problem to have, but just to keep inventories up and damage under control, anything, we monitor all that. Teachers now have to kind of literally barcode and take the carts out. And I go up to the library where they're housed, and every day they're all gone. So they're being used. I think it's good to continue doing that because I'd love to foster more teachers using like a Google Classroom. We have a number that do, but we also have a number that don't. I see elementary school kids coming up with a lot of discussion about that, and they use that, and it's very successful with them. So I'd like to try to make sure that our teachers are getting involved with that too, so those kids have that familiarity. As far as the projectors go, for whatever reason, I haven't had one quit in a while. I think it is something we have to continue to keep in our consciousness because there is no plan to replace them when they break. They were gifted. I did have a period of time where we looked at some boards, more or less like Christine has at Miss Nealon has at her school, where there are interactive TVs on the walls. They're Prometheus boards, they're called. They're very pricey, but they're kind of the state of the art and that kind of thing. So we'll continue to look at, there's whiteboard, interactive whiteboard, other kind of things we'll continue to look at. But for right now, the projectors are holding firm. And I think another part is that more people are using Chromebooks, so they're not leaning on the projector as much because the kids are interacting with the screen themselves. The third goal, so like everybody, we're faced with students who are having difficulty coming to school, and beyond that, to me, it's also students who are in school but not able to attend class, and that's a kind of a difficult thing to capture. So I've asked my student services, my nurse, to try to keep a better track of, it's easier for kids absent or kids not absent, but when they're in school and not in class, how do we account for those minutes? And we have 31 students who we feel identify in this category. Many of them did pretty well this year, but I had my student services kind of look at the 10 top students. I think there were 6 8th graders and 4 7th graders. The tricky part about tracking this data and keeping this data is it's very kind of cohort driven. Like this year was like this. Next year, the 8th graders go off to high school, 7th graders move up, 7th graders move in. It's a different group. So to say like the number this year was, so many minutes missed out of class and so many absences and dismissals and tardies, it doesn't relate to the next year. So we're trying to develop some baseline data, I guess is what I'm getting at, and tracking systems. The nurse uses aspirin. We're trying to get a similar thing for our student services. So when a student comes in, they can kind of put in that they were there, why they were there, what time they came in and what time they left. We've done a lot of, my student service and assistant principal did year-long PD on anxiety related to how we're going to write 504s for those type of students, but also just good information about how we identify and what accommodations they need. Our student services people, that's Ms. Securgis, our social worker, and Ms. Salvatore, our guidance counselor, did a great job kind of taking our student services suite and making it into a kind of a safe place for these kids. My concern is always, you know, they have to be out of class because they're having a difficult being there for whatever reason, but how can we kind of give them an academic setting so that they can have a quiet place to work on some material and still get that support that they need. So they were able to take an office and kind of make it into that. So when kids are out of class, I just can't go back. Well, why don't you go in there and I'll get you some work to do. So at least they're getting some work done. We had a real good system, especially in 7th grade, of the 7th grade teachers coming to student services and sitting down with the students and just talking to them like, hey, missed you in class today, and just kind of building that kind of relationship. We found that was a big piece in some of these kids being able to go back to class and attend more regularly. We obviously use peers support to come in, eat lunch in student services. You know, kids have a hard time. A lot of these kids have a hard time going to the CAF. So the nurse and student services worked in tandem. A lot of kids report to the nurse, and it's really not a physical ailment, but it's their anxiety or whatever, and it manifests itself as something that maybe a stomach ache or a headache. And they do a good job working together and figuring out what it actually is and what kind of support they actually need. And obviously, a lot of our parents are on first name basis with our student services people. So I think we ultimately kind of made a dent. I can use one example. We had a student at the beginning of the year, just out of the blue. Parents had no idea why, just could not attend class. Spent a lot of time over the first month and a half of school. We tried different placements, we tried different teachers, we tried a lot of things. But just continually working with the family, a lot of meetings with the family, with the student, with the teachers. By the end of a quarter into the year, you wouldn't even know the student had any issues at all. And to this day, be bopping around the school like nothing. So we've done some things that work. We have some other kids that unfortunately weren't as successful with, but I think overall, and this is probably, we talk about data, it's one of those things you kind of see that I felt like the visits and the kids spending a lot of time in student services kind of drifted downward as the year progressed. Some of that might be just boredom with it. Some of it was they just kind of got the support they need and they felt like getting back to class was important. And but I think some of the stuff we put in place certainly helped with that. And we'll continue to work on that. And just as a note, we have 5 faculty members continuing on with the trauma class, the 3rd version of the trauma class, which kind of relates to all that. And then our 4th goal, which is the schedule. I don't know, you might have heard about it. I think I've been here a few times to talk to you about it. So, how I say this. So I've had some time to reflect on this whole process, and I've talked to Mr. Thorgett, and I have a saying that I use with my staff, and it's there's no one of us that's any smarter than all of us. And this process, I think I took a piece on, and I didn't include a lot of people that I probably should have. There's a conceptual part to the schedule that's in my head, and I share with people. And then there's a technical part. The technical part and the conceptual part don't often meet and agree. And I mean that by, why don't we do this? It would be great. And then they say, well, you put that in Aspen, it doesn't rotate. And then you go to a class and you got 50 kids here and this person doesn't get a planning. So all that stuff has to be considered. So we've done some, and this is all about the schedule is in place this year. It worked. I think it worked okay. but we need to make some improvements to it. And we're getting very close to having it good to go for next year and being able to include those, which includes 8th graders having some choice about their electives, interventions for 8th graders all year long that are identified Tier 2. As you can see, I put in some of the, and you can see on the bar graph earlier in the document, our iReady scores, especially in 7th grade, really did well this year. We've moved a lot of kids from the bottom to the, sorry, I forget the terms. Sorry, it's actually after what I'm talking about. It's on page 10. 13% of kids, we moved 53% to 70% by the end of the year of kids that are core. I'm more proud of the fact that we moved 13% of the kids out of intensive into strategic or core. So it went from 27% in intensive at the beginning of the year in 7th grade to 14% at the end of the year. 8th grade moved as well, not as much. Obviously, it stayed pretty flat in that intensive group, and I reflected on the fact that I wasn't able to get the interventions in place for some of those Tier 2 kids in 8th grade this year that I wanted to, and I hopefully we got that tackled for next year. So, getting back to the schedule, Ms. Cotto referenced the project-based learning. Our intervention class in 8th grade will be that. It's going to be taught by our reading specialist and our interventionist. And I think it's going to give students a different way to develop some literacy skills that isn't sitting in your standard English class and the reading and the writing part. It's more hands-on and project-based. We're just looking into the PD for that. It's coming up in August, and I think that's going to do those students well, because I think it's going to be getting those skills, but in a very different way. We also will have that class in place for all 7th graders. It'll be kind of their 5th. Every 7th grader will rotate through that. And then what we'll do is identify going into 8th grade who needs to continue with that. We've made some inroads, sharing Mr. Lathrop from the high school with our video production class this year. We're hoping to improve on that next year, and now we're actually talking about some of our 8th graders attending a high school video production class with some freshmen, maybe sophomores. I also had a very brief conversation similarly about foreign language, maybe sharing some foreign language teachers. I know there's a desire to have middle school kids attend high school classes, and I think this is the first place we can start doing that. And I know I talked today with Ms. Croto, and we want to start looking at that next year, but where else can we do that? Maybe in math, social study, what have you. Talked about electives. And we're going to have some Aspen training for my assistant principal, who's new, and she really wants to do it and get into it and be involved in that. And I'm saying, you can do that. Glad to have you do that. So the goals stay the same. We've changed some of the this past year. Ms. Bates worked with my 8th grade teachers getting them to be more facilitators and get more group work going in classrooms. I've seen it myself. It's amazing, the 180-degree turn on that. So that's good. That's in place. So that was in here as a priority action. I've taken that out. But the PD is going to continue for the math, and we're going to continue to look at technology. I've asked the math teachers to look into ways they can do some online assessment. It's hard to duplicate what MCAS does, like with the drop-down tools and all that kind of stuff, but I feel just having kids take assessments online helps them with the MCAS, which is online. So we're looking at those. We, because of leases, we have a computer lab, it's all PCs. That's going to be kind of rolled over and turned into a Chromebook cart, so that'll be Chromebook cart number 9. And our library computers are going to be turned over to Chrome bases, so they'll all be able to be used for MCAS, which we've never been able to use, so that's a whole nother group of computers. It does mean we're going to have to change our computer science class in 7th grade. But we've already chosen, or we're in the midst of choosing another program that's online and free, and it works with Chromebooks. Right now, the one that we've been using, it's called Alice, and it only works with PCs. It doesn't work with Chromebooks. But I traded off that for having another cart, which I think is important. So the teachers are on board with that, and we're working on that. As I said, the more we increase Chromebooks, the likelihood of teachers moving over to Google Classroom increases, which we want. And we're going to continue to look for options for projection and presentations. All the things that we've put in place for student services for those students identified with anxiety and depression, we're going to continue to put in place. I will have conversations with the new high school principal about the bridge program and how middle school might be able to access that. I will pat myself on the back because I put in this document, when I developed it, that program, before we even knew what a bridge program was. And I had walked people through the section of the building where the TELC program is now moving out of, which is going to allow an area, and I walked through and I said, this is where we need to put that program. They can come in that end door. They don't have to come in the main door with everybody else. There's big spaces. We can fill it full of stuff that they need to make them feel comfortable. And so I don't often do that, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to pat myself on the back. So, because we saw this coming a long time ago, being in education for a period of time I have, you see the shift. We talk about behavioral students. That behavioral student for me is now the anxious student, and that manifests itself with behaviors and tantruming and stuff like that. So those kids just need a different approach. So we're going to keep working on that. We've done professional development on social emotional learning. We have two professional development sessions set up next year, one on anxiety and one on identifying students who might be suicidal. And we'll be doing those next year because it all kind of goes hand in hand. And then, I've talked about the schedule and what we're trying to do going into next year. I think the students are really excited, 8th graders, about picking electives, and I think we've got to the point where they will get their top 3. They may end up with another 1 or 2 that they didn't pick, but we have to fill out schedules, and that's what we'll be doing. The blocks of time for interventions, one thing we need to work on is what do we do with the students who kind of excel, and we're gonna take a look at that. This is a kind of a one step at a time, and it's we got to make time for this, time for that, and then you got to find people to do it. But we'll continue to work on it. So this goal, I foresee it taking the 3 years and maybe beyond, just because I think every year we'll probably be doing some tweaks to it to best use what it offers. And I will say that, after reflecting and having conversation with Mr. Forget, we're going to put together a group of people next year that are going to kind of meet periodically, teachers, administrators, student services, and just look at the schedule, how we're using it, are we using it the best we can, what changes we can put in place for next year. So-and-so would be able to do that if we can find time for that, those kind of conversations. And then we can all share in its success when it's successful. So I think that's about it.
Questions or comments from the committee? Go ahead, Dina.
I meant to ask this of the elementary school principals as well, but do the students have any required reading over the summer or activities of any sort?
Yes, there's let me think now. There's a 6 to 7 is a book to read. I'm sorry, it escapes me the title. And there's an activity that goes with it that they do at the beginning of the year. The 7th graders choose a book we have a book and they choose a book. There's 2. And the parents, we do it before they leave for the year so the parents can sign off on the book, because we had a year once where we put out a list and it didn't go over so well with some parents. So we decided, well, they're here in the building. Why don't we have them pick before they leave 7th grade, and everybody can be on the same page about what they're reading. So I think they're required to read 2 books over the summer. Yeah.
Elementary school principals, same thing? Are the kids required any reading or any activity like that?
We do a summer math packet at NES for each grade level, and there is some reading for some students, some grade levels.
Good. All right, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Erin?
Can you talk a little bit about the social studies online curriculum, and is that replacing classroom teaching, or how does the program work?
Feel free to help me out with that one.
Have a small, is it next week that we were going to present next week
Next,
on that? On the next school
2
committee.
weeks for the regular business
Yeah.
meeting. We'll do a little more full detailed presentation on, we're talking about the 8th grade civics?
Yeah.
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 So far
I mean,
more detail then.
It's a new program, so they just adopted it. So that we were planning to present next school committee to tell you more about it.
But it is much more based on online than textbooks and stuff like that. That's why they get Chromebooks.
But in class taught.
Correct.
So it's happening in class.
Yeah.
It's more of a digital resource rather than a
Yes.
Online
Thank you.
courses.
textbook from 1962.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the additional emotional supports that you needed, you identified in, it's page 8, under goal 3. You said it's evident we need additional supports and programming to meet all of the need.
Yeah, so that comes to, if you go into the middle school on a daily basis, the student services office is a pretty busy place. Kids coming and going. There are kids in there that have goals and IEPs that have to meet with the social worker. There are kids that just show up because they're having a bad day. There are kids that go in there to eat lunch. So that is basically around maybe, I hate to use the word program, but a location where those kids can go long-term and have more of an academic setting, get the social emotional support they need, but also have more of an academic setting. So I guess it's a program. We have 2 special ed programs in the building. We used to have 3. There was a behavioral, there was one for ASD students, and we have one for kind of everybody else that needs that kind of support. My thought was more of a resource room that was always manned by someone who had, a good relationship with some of these kids, and we could kind of rotate through the day, a way that it wouldn't be like trying to add extra staff. Maybe we got to get to the point, I may be here one day asking, I need a person to run a space like this. The kids are it's overwhelming. But right now, it would be more of a space using people we have already on staff to be that academic component, because like I said, it's more than just kids missing school, it's kids in school missing class time, so just trying to make up that thing.
So it sounds like there's a big need, not just with the group that you've identified, but maybe perhaps there's other students in the grade that may not have outwardly identified these anxiety issues. Is there plans to do a grade-wide or program to help them work through their anxiety or social issues?
So I guess the answer is no. As students identify, our teachers are, teachers being middle school teachers are pretty savvy at seeing, this doesn't seem quite right to me. She or he's very quiet, leaves to go to the bathroom all the time, going to the nurse all the time. And we have a student support team that meets every week, and those kind of kids are kind of referred to that. It's myself, the assistant principal, student services, and the nurse. And so we talk about that, and we do background, and we look at transition. We kind of research what's going on, and most of the time they've been identified. Some sometime, but maybe at that point, we're thinking they're just doing pretty well this year. So, I
I'm
don't
thinking
know if I'm
along the
answering your
lines of
question.
like making them feel comfortable with their peers as opposed to just.
Oh, you mean the kids that I'm talking about this,
So the kids that you've talked about that you've
Yeah.
identified, but then
Yeah.
also maybe someone else would benefit from the learning if you're doing it across the board.
yeah, I guess I'm not, you said go through classrooms and.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
if you're using utilizing the resources with the groups that you've identified, and I'm wondering if there's any crossover with the other students.
Okay, so we have a wellness class in 7th grade. It's the second year we've had it. Our student services people go to that class and talk about these things and talk about options and talk about services and talk about supports and stuff like that. So we do that throughout the school day, both 7th and 8th grade. The 8th graders do a life skills curriculum through physical education. So there are times where all this kind of stuff is discussed, healthy relationships and things like that. So is that kind of what you're?
Yeah, I was wondering if it would impact how these students feel to be able to integrate and to be able to feel more comfortable with their
I see what
class.
you're saying, yeah. That's happened. We've had students kind of buddy up with other students, and they makes them feel a lot better about going back to class. We'll change kids' schedules so that they can be in classes together. We've done that before. Some of these kids certainly respond to that. A lot of these kids are just to the point where, they're not there. They're just not able to say, a lot of them, it's sad to hear, but they just say, no one likes me, everybody hates me, I don't feel good about myself, so how can I like it, those kind of things. So, but yes, we do have a lot of kind kids in the middle school, and they do help out and reach out. We have kids that will go over and sit with kids in lunch, those kind of things. But yes, there's an effort for that, yes. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you're getting at, but I get it now.
Tina?
Yep. I just want to add too, I think it's important to recognize what the teachers are doing just on a daily basis. This spring, when I had the opportunity to do some presentations at the middle school, I was there to see, the change of the classes and seeing the kids in the halls, and I was amazed. I mean, even when my kids were here years ago, the teachers would interact with them, but I saw teachers out in the hall calling out kids saying, hey, how was your game? How'd you do on that test? Whatever. It was loud, but it was fabulous. And I think that does a lot to help kids be comfortable, not only with their teachers, but with each other. The kids don't seem to feel so ostracized, I think, when you see that interaction and you see people, adults actually asking kids and teasing them and everything. But I think that really needs to be mentioned, and I commend them all for that. It was just a great experience to see.
I agree.
I think that should be your new theme, loud but awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
was.
That's middle school right there, loud but awesome.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, excellent. Thank you, Mr. McCray.
Thank you.
Val?
The dual, no, Principal Daw? I wasn't sure if Principal-elect Kelly was joining you, or?
If he wants to join me, he can. I would welcome that. I'd like to do a commercial break for a minute, though.
This is a good commercial break.
Yesterday, we were awarded.
Catherine, can you just use your
Grab the
microphone?
mic, yeah.
Yeah,
was
and
gonna
this
say
is
it, but okay.
this isn't a commercial. This is something to celebrate.
Well, I know, but
this
it's
is more
different
than a
from the school
commercial.
improvement plan, so that's why. Yesterday, the athletic department, the high school, was awarded the Cape Ann League Highland Award. And what it is I asked Sean to kind of give me a little bit of a rundown on it. It used to be an award that was given to the schools that had the best overall record for girls and boys teams. And over time, that began back in 1974, and over time, the Cape Ann League decided to change some of the requirements or the emphasis of this award. And so in the spring of 2014, athletic directors changed the criteria to represent more of a 21st century student athlete and the ideal of educational athletics. And so schools now are judged on excellence on the field, participation rates, sportsmanship, and academic excellence throughout their athletic program. And so the biggest piece for me there is the sportsmanship, because I think for us, we do a really great job all around with our athletes, but I think the sportsmanship really speaks for who we are and who we want our students to represent for Triton. So we received this award this week from the Cape Ann League. Now, unfortunately, I got all excited, and I didn't tell Brian this yet, but I just found out that we tied Newburyport with it, so I'm not real happy about that. In fact, I'm very disappointed, but...
This is a little bit bigger. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, I just wanted to share that because it's a great award, and I'm very proud of the school that they did this.
And we should also say, too, that we kind of said it in passing quickly, but so the girls' softball team beat Arlington Catholic 12-6 today. So they are now in the D2 North Finals this Saturday against Gloucester. So that's awesome.
Our
for
teams
those.
are doing great.
They're doing phenomenally. So that is
I'm also going to just add one other thing, because I'm not going to be here next year, so I thought I'd add my unsolicited suggestion.
wait. She's not going to be in this
No, I'm not
role
going to be in this
next year.
position.
She's not going anywhere.
Exactly. Next year, when we do this again, let's go back to the old way where we do a few each night, because this just really, it's overwhelming for all of you, I'm sure.
You feel like very bold on your departure.
Well, I have nothing to lose. I keep telling you that. I have nothing to lose. So first of all, I would like to recognize the fact that this year the school council, it was wonderful. It was an absolutely exceptional group. We had 7 parent community reps on the council. 4 of them were longstanding parents and community reps, and then we had 3 new members that joined us. And then we had 8 faculty members that were on the council, which is just extraordinary to me. And they represented all academic areas, with the exception of history. But it was all the core academic areas. So when we put together this plan, it was real, and it was relevant, and it was going to represent what those teachers, with the input from parents and community members, really want to see happening in the high school as we move forward. We also have 4 student reps on the council as well, very active, 1 from each grade level. So I just want to, their names are in the school improvement plan, but I think it's really important to recognize the commitment that they have made to stick with this and be dedicated to the improvement of the high school as we move forward. That being said, what I would like to address at this point, no disrespect meant at all, but I think most of you are aware that the high school has been in a couple of awkward years, and it has been pretty difficult to get us back on track and get people to believe that there is a direction that really they can make a decision about where we want to go and how we're going to get there. So in the creation of this plan, we took into consideration a few things. One, knowing that the council is going to remain the school council next year. All of those that are serving as members are committed to remain on the council next year. Patrick Kelly graciously joined us, I think, for one of the early on meetings that we had as we were talking about what our hopes were for the school improvement plan. And it was a great meeting because Patrick was able to share his visions for what he's hoping can happen with the council. And so that put us in a position, though, where we weren't really sure how much we felt we should put together a school improvement plan that the new high school principal was going to be left with and forced to implement. And they felt really strongly that that wouldn't be a very fair thing to do to a new principal coming in. However, they did have a plan that was in place, and they did not feel that it truly represented the voices of the council or of the teachers. They had a plan, it was, I think, 2018 to 2020 or 21, and the first thing they said to me was that was not a plan that they really had input in, and that they didn't feel as though that's even something that they wanted to leave for the new principal because they didn't feel like it was going to represent who they were. So the decision was we were going to go through the plan that was in front of us, and we would try to pull out the goals and some of the priority action steps that would represent hopes for where we want the high school to go. It was, they wanted to leave it, though, where the principal could come in and make some adjustments along the way and change some of the action steps, add new action steps, based on conversations that happen when that new principal comes in. So what I'm proposing to you is a school improvement plan very much endorsed by the school council, but also with the caveat saying that they want it to be known that they want this to be a flexible document where the new principal can come in, have some input, and really put his mark on it with the school council as well. So it's not in its final stage at all. It's not as comprehensive in any way, shape, or form as what was presented to you by the other principals, but it's real. And I'm disappointed that Beth Demento was not able to be here tonight because she is so excited about the work that went into putting this particular plan together with the council, because the past couple of years they felt that they really didn't have the input, and they were just left with a document that they didn't really know how it even came about. So I'm going to just kind of briefly go through it. On page 6 are the MCAS results from last spring. And I just want to talk about 2 of the areas. One of them is the math area. We're pretty disappointed in the number of students that are at proficient or higher. Our scores usually in the past have been much better than that. So this past year, fortunately, we had Anna Bates, who was able to work with the math department, and they spent some significant time really delving into the item analysis of the MCAS. And I don't think our math department really has taken the time to do that in the past. It was very eye-opening for them. They were able to look at the standards to see where the standards are taught, where they're lacking in the emphasis on areas in their classes, and they took it to heart. So I know that their work this coming year is to really make sure that they are looking at those and being sure that the students are getting what they need to in order to be successful on MCAS. That being said, this year was the first year our 10th graders took MCAS online. So it's going to be hard to gauge that because I'm not real confident that the first year is a very good measure of how students are going to do. So I think that's important to keep in mind as we move forward. Our science scores are pretty dismal, and they have been probably for a while. But again, I can't tell you, there's not a department in that building that I am more excited about. Again, Anna Bates met with the science teachers and did a lot of work with item analysis as well. And in particular, the biology curriculum, which is the MCAS tested subject, needed a lot of work. And with the new standards, the science teachers have really spent a lot of time this year meeting together and coming up with ways in which to teach the biology in a way that the students understand it, that the students can relate the items to something that happens in a different situation. So they're not just memorizing things, they're learning how to use the science. And fortunately next year, or hopefully next year, we're going to be able to update our science curriculum and our science materials so that will truly support the learning that the science teachers are gearing towards with the students. And again, I can't speak highly enough of the science department. If any of you are in the building next year, come and see our science department. It has grown leaps and bounds, and the work that's being done in that department is just amazing. So if you get a chance to pop in and see something, because it's really some great stuff happening. So in terms of the focus area for the school improvement plan, as you know, our NEAS collaborative visit is happening in November of next year. But we didn't want the school improvement plan to be about NEASC. That's not what it's about. However, during the NEASC process, there was a self-reflection survey that was sent out to parents, students, staff, and the school council decided to take a look at the results of that self-reflection survey to see if that kind of could help guide some of their work in moving forward and setting some goals. And so on page 7 are some of the comments that went along with the self-reflection survey and the characteristics that the high school is most proud of. And then also some of the concerns that were identified as well in the self-reflection survey. So in looking at those, we tried to take and incorporate some of the areas that were concerns into the goals for the year. The other thing this high school needs to be focused on next year is looking at what the vision of a graduate is. Right now, we have a mission and expectation statement, which has been in place for probably a good 10 to 12 years. And now we're moving towards, with the NEAS process, what is the vision of our graduate? What do we want our students to be able to know, do, and demonstrate upon graduating? So that's going to be a big focus area. We will be doing some work on that this coming year in our PD times as well. So the 4 goals that we have come up with moving forward, and again, they are goals that are overarching goals, but also we want them to be goals that could be fluid as we move into next year. The first goal, there will be more consistency in our curriculum, delivery of instruction, and grading with respect to courses and levels. That's not a new goal. I think that probably has been a goal probably for the past 4 or 5 years. We haven't yet found the key to make that happen in all departments. We've made strides moving forward in terms of midterm assessments, common midterm assessments, some common quarterly assessments. But in terms of grading and how teachers even out percentages for grades in the same level course, we haven't gotten there. So there is some discrepancy for what does an A mean in one course for one teacher, and what does it mean for another teacher? And we really need to beef that up and really take a serious look at that, so that when a parent or a student receives a grade, it means the same thing no matter what teacher that they have. So we do know that's an area that we need to be concentrating on. Our second goal, Triton High School will ensure the instructional strategies, procedures, and supports are in place to improve student learning and well-being in an effort to address the social and emotional health of all students. It seems like it's a lot all in one statement, but we didn't want to separate out just the social and emotional part of a student, because that's what makes a difference in the classroom. And teachers and parents felt as though within the classroom we need to be addressing the social and emotional needs of the students. In the fall, we do have a couple of PD sessions that we have speakers coming in. One is on a mental health presentation, and I think Alan was talking about that as well, and also one on anxiety and school performance. So both of those professional development offerings are in direct correlation to goal number 2. Goal number 3, Triton High School will promote student engagement and opportunities for students to be part of their broader community. That's a goal that the council itself really felt they wanted to put in. It hadn't been put in before. And if I recall, Mr. Patrick Kelly sitting behind me, I don't know what his face is going to be when I say this, but he's definitely someone who really wants students to be involved in the community. He wants them to be able to be citizens that are out there and can represent Triton and really make a difference in the community. He has a strong belief in that. And so this goal, I think, might have been an area that he offered when he met with us. Okay. He would say yes anyways, but I do recall that. And so the council felt really good about adding that in as a goal too, because they also believe that in our vision of a graduate, we also want to have students who are civic members and who are out in the community and doing great things. And the fourth goal, Triton High School will pursue and implement programs that will facilitate academic growth and development for all students. And that kind of goes a little bit along with goal number 3 as well, but it's to broaden the programs for students, whether it's in the core curricular areas or also in the elective areas, but looking at what are we offering students, what do they need so that they can become the Triton graduate that we want them to be. I'm not going to go through the action steps because what we did as a council, we went through the original school improvement plan. We kept some of the action steps and then we moved others around that we felt belonged in a better place based on the goals. But the action steps are those things that probably will be changing over time within the next year. But they do support the goals. But we haven't really gotten to those places where those action steps have gotten to be put into place yet. So I'm not going to spend the time going through that, but if you had questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And I think I'm going to stop there so I can get like the prize for the shortest one.
Can you just give an update where we are in the NEASC process, the alignment with this, and then?
Yep. So we're like in awesome shape. We're in awesome
Stop
shape. So, yeah, you gotta stop there. So basically, next week, the two co-chairs of the NEASC steering committee, Sarah Scruton and Sue Densmore, and myself, are going to write up the final self-reflection study report, which has to be submitted to NEASC, but it doesn't need to be submitted to NEASC like until 6 weeks before the visit. But we want to write it now because we are at a place where there has been lots of buy-in from parents, from teachers, from students, and we know where we are. So we've had all the data compiled, and now that it's fresh in our minds, we want to put together that report. And it will also be a good document to give to Mr. Kelly so that he sees where we've come from and what the self-reflection surveys have given us in terms of a direction to go. So I think it's a good time for that report, and it will be shared with everyone once it's done. But our hope is that the majority of that report will be written by the end of next week. The collaborative visit, I think, is November 13th and 14th. That's the date. It's a small group of educators that come in. They only come in for 2 days, and they'll visit classrooms. They'll meet with teachers and staff and school committee members and superintendent, the central office administrators. And they just ask questions. They take some information down. They kind of gather what we think our goals are for our school. And then they say, okay, this is what we've seen. It looks good, the direction you're going. We're not going to tell you where to go, but you might want to look at this. And so it's not prescriptive. They don't tell us what we have to do, but they're an outside set of eyes that help us to set a really good direction that's going to make a difference for us.
And then they come back in 2 years.
Then they come back in 2 years, and that's called the decennial visit.
That's when you hear the visit, that's really the visit. So we set the goals, and they come back, and that's when the full report is written up based on that report. So that's 2 years from this fall.
Right. Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions?
Comments or questions? Oh,
Yes.
Paul?
Yeah, sorry.
Can you grab your
yes.
mic? Thank you.
On goal number 1 there, with the consistency in the curriculum, how much time has the faculty spent discussing what an A looks like or what a B looks like? What a C looks like? Is that something that the whole
Yeah,
faculty?
that's a great question. We probably did that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but we left it. We haven't done any work on it since then. And we had very good discussions, but they were just beginning discussions. So I think we need to get back right to the grassroots of that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I would say yes, do that. The best, and when I worked in Marblehead, we had in the handbook something that people had snuck into the school committee meeting and gotten the school committee to vote on. And it was, what does an A look like and what does a B look like? And it gave the department heads a really good tool at to make sure that teachers were being consistent, having that policy there. But in terms of actually getting the consistency, you probably need to change the psychology of who applies to be a high school teacher, because we all have the biggest egos in the district. So,
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Paul took my question.
Paul took your question. Oh, man. Anybody else? No? I just had one question. I noticed that a lot of it revolves around planning. Do you, just in your action items in general, is there a common time in the schedule today where it can be done during the school day, or is some of this involving after school time? I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out where the
Planning time comes
Yeah.
in. So departments meet varied times, but they're required to meet at least once a month. Lots of departments do meet at lunchtime, and they have informal kinds of meetings for that. We do have some days in the professional development calendar that are specifically devoted to department meeting time, where they would have the opportunity to do that. It's never enough. And I've also told teachers that I will free up the teachers and get a sub or get coverage for them if they tell me that there's a specific area of work that they want to be doing in the department, and I have no hesitation to free them up so that they can have some time to collaborate in that way, because there really isn't a whole lot of time to do that.
Any other questions, comments? No? Seeing none. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.
So if I can just say thank you to the principals for being here tonight, and to echo Catherine's point, I don't think all in one night is the best way, so as we continue to think that through. And also to say thank you to Anna Bates for being here. She was referenced several times, so thank you, Anna. And for Patrick for being here, even though he's not yet a Triton employee. Thank you.
And if you can carry the thanks back to all your school councils, because I know there's a tremendous amount of time that they've put in here as well, and that should not go unnoticed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have any final words on that?
I have no final words on it.
All right, that's good. So just quick wrap up. Next Wednesday is the meeting here with, it's actually all of our legislators. I finally got the final confirmation from Representative Hill this afternoon. So it'll be Senator Tarr, Senator DeZoglio, Representative Mira, Kalkorsen Hill will all be here. That's at 7 o'clock. I understand from conversations with Senator Tarr's office that they are preparing a ton of information. They actually have somebody assigned just to prepping information on the Chapter 70 bills right now. So I don't know if we're going to get an advance peek at that. I keep kind of pinging them like, hey, what do you think, what do you think's going on, But I anticipate that at the very least, he'll be bringing all that information that night, and we'll be going through it as part of that that discussion. I did have confirmation as well from, I know a number of you, I believe the only Board of Selectmen that we don't currently have someone coming from is Rowley, but there is at least one Rowley Finance Committee member that's coming, so hopefully I'll continue to get RSVPs as time goes on. I've been trying to, send out emails periodically just to remind people that that's coming up. So that is next Wednesday, the 19th, and then our final business meeting of this school year is June 26th. So just a reminder that that's happening as well. And remember Brian's evaluation, please, if we could. By Monday. Did you have something to say? I know, Lynn's ready with the motion. I didn't know if she was going for that or she was going for a comment.
Gotta get home, the Bruins are down 2-0.
Oh, can I get a motion to adjourn then?
Make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? All right, unanimous. Thank you all.
Oh, my goodness.
I know, it's a long sit.
Yeah, that's not.
Evaluate. Brian, you didn't ask.
Say that again.
I said you didn't ask us what we participated in.
Aaron's
this
got
month.
a very
I've got
long
a
list.
That's our business meeting. That's coming up
all right.
on the 26th.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was our special meeting of the month, so.